A horror. What is that? The Dr. Stephen Brule when he's talking about how to talk like a sailor? He's like, well, a horror. Welcome aboard another episode, folks.
Yeah, I don't want to welcome aboard the flagship of this episode, but welcome aboard the knowledge dinghy. No, it's bigger than a dinghy.
Well, it'd be the USS Sativa. The USS, yeah.
I like that. We've done a lot of World War II episodes.
Yeah, it's funny to be jokey. And then, because it's going to get dark. About halfway through this episode, it's going to get dark.
Yeah, it's almost like you got to be punchy for the first half just to be able to understand and suck into the second half. Like, we have to be so much higher for the first half because the second half is going to drop us down that we just need to find that crazy midline.
So I had a pretty general knowledge of the USS Indianapolis. I was aware what its secret mission was. I was aware that it was sunk. I was aware there were sharks. And that in itself, when you just rapid fire it like that, it's like, that's a fucking tragedy at sea. It's extremely cool because of the secret mission component of all of it. But when you dig into this thing, it is nightmare scenario on top of nightmare scenario. And I don't mean that from just like a naval standpoint of like, our nightmare scenario was we lost one of our biggest or most prestigious ships. I'm talking from a personal level of, first of all, there's a certain level of fear just to being on a ship out in the middle of the ocean.
Can't see any land.
And you just look at the vastness, because you can stand on the dock and you're looking at that ship and you're like, this is the biggest thing I've ever seen. You get out on the ocean, you see nothing around you. And you kind of understand like, this isn't anything but a speck in the
Sand
water.
On the beach.
And even coming from the standpoint of these guys are between the ages of a lot of them 16, 18, 19, and joining the Navy, they're seeing not only the ocean, probably for the first time in their lives themselves, like they're seeing this massive ship, the Indianapolis, and they just got to be thinking, the largest thing I'd seen before, there's a couple guys referenced tractors.
Yep.
And they're looking at this thing. You got to imagine once you get on top of it, you're like, I thought the ocean was supposed to be, kind of rough. Like this, we're pretty much standing still on this. And then put them in a situation where they're seeing open water. Ship gets torpedoed. Nightmare number one, your ship goes out from under you. Oh, not even that. Not the ship going out from under you. It's the attack on the ship.
Yeah.
Okay, one, ship ends up going out from under you. Number two, you are in the dark in the ocean. Can't see shit because there's no other light. Maybe the moonlight's peeking through a little bit.
That might be the biggest scary thing for me, is because anytime you ever see an at-sea moment, like in a movie or anything like that, you're always seeing it with enough light for the camera to show.
Yeah, like when you see like the end of Titanic.
Uh-huh.
A lot of moonlight, you can pick people out and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
the Tom Hanks movie.
Yeah.
He's on the island.
Oh, Castaway.
Yeah, Castaway.
Oh, when they're in the ocean, the lightning, so you can see the plane kind of. And
when these dudes are in the water, the small sliver of moonlight that was able to show through for the submarine to pick up the USS Indianapolis is gone. You can't see the hand in front of your face. You can't see the water that you're landing in. It's just black.
Okay, and normally, and I know we're kind of already getting into it. We're going to do the intro here in a second, but
So excited
let us
about
cook
this.
here. What's also abnormal about this? Usually, if someone goes down, your ship gets torpedoed, what's around you?
Water?
No. What's usually around you by protocol?
A lifeboat? A life vest?
Other ships?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because you're supposed to be sailing as a fleet. No one ever travels alone. That's like completely against naval doctrine. You're alone. Nightmare scenario 4.
It's like when there's a murderer out on the streets, you walk in pairs.
And now we introduce the aspect of nightmare scenario 5. You're now in shark-infested waters.
There's a 4.5 in with the water. The oil that they landed.
I
mean, this is, to break this down in the simplest terms before we jump into the intro that everybody loves. We have 3 stories today. We have the story about a ship that went out and did some fantastic things
Was a highly decorated ship.
Yes.
And the only reason it's known is because of it going down in these attacks.
Survives a kamikaze attack. Then we get this beautiful story where it does this top secret mission to crescendo kind of the first story.
It was at some of the most major battles.
Second story starts off just plain and dumb that it's going to take guys over to train to potentially land in Japan. Second story starts that way. Torpedo, they're all into the water.
Second story that it's short.
But it's an incredible,
yeah.
It's a short, heavy, dense 5-day story.
Yeah.
And then the third story starts with the fallout of why the second story happened.
Oh, second story meaning the actual torpedoing in the water. I meant just the second story being now it's on its journey back. And the third story starts when they go in the water.
Possibly, but I would say the third story starts when they're back on land. Because then you have the Navy trying to explain why they were going by themselves.
Yep. Yeah, then the finger pointing. And this whole thing, finger pointing starts. Okay, folks. Professor Chris, it's Professor Adam over to my side.
Ahoy.
Ahoy. All right. I don't even know how to introduce this thing. You got anything?
Let's batten down the hatches.
All right. Okay, let's talk about this big bitch herself. Let's talk about the Indianapolis.
Indianapolis is cool as shit. It was the second of 2 Portland-class ships that were built following the Washington Naval Treaty of 1922. To go back a little bit, I believe we talked about this in multiple episodes, but the treaty was basically the limitations for tonnage for the victors from World War I, and then to stop the buildup from everybody else after World War II. Japan, being an ally during World War I, thought, hey, this is great. We'll get as much tonnage as we want. We're an island nation that can build as many ships as possible. And they fell out of the Washington Naval Treaty to be less than the United States and Great Britain. Probably some anger there. The Indianapolis was 10,000 tons. It was 610 feet long. It was just a big, beautiful ship. So in 1932, the cost to build this ship, it was commissioned November 7th, 1932, at a cost of $10.9 million. That's got to be $200-300 million today.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the conversion, but kind of jumping back to the naval treaty. So this was a heavy cruiser. This wasn't a battleship. And so kind of as far as naming goes, you would have battleships being named after states, aircraft carriers named after famous battles where you get like Lexington, Bunker Hill, that kind of stuff, or also Enterprise named after another ship.
A rental car company.
And then, and then the smaller ships, even heavy cruisers, would be named after cities. So a heavy cruiser, basically when the Washington Naval Treaty was drafted, like Adam was saying, it was like tonnage. The dimensions for what a ship could be as far as size and then also its armament and what it could carry was also dictated by the Naval Treaty. And don't quote me, but I want to say it was universal across the board for all the countries that fell into this. The kicker here is that because the United States and Great Britain had an increased amount of tonnage, like much more than any other country, they were able to say, hey, we have enough tonnage to build several of these heavy cruisers. We can also then build a whole bunch of other support ships and things like that. You had the countries that had less tonnage that were like, well, we could build like 3 of these heavy cruisers and then not have anything else. So they had to divide up. So it was always an advantage.
This is when you're trying to explain something to a kid and you're like, you can get this $50 toy or I can buy you 5 $10 toys. Which would you rather have?
It does not compute. I can assure you. If their heart is set on the 50, money has no concept. I'm going to tell you right now. Until you make them start spending their own, zero concept. This thing was laid down. So the keel was laid down March 31st, 1930. Ends up being launched November 7th, 1931.
Oh, that's what I missed. It was ordered 1929. So 7 years after the treaty.
Yeah, there has to be there has to be a process to it. So it's essentially launched in 31. So it takes them a little over a year and what would that be? A year and like 5 months, year and 6 months to construct this thing. It gets commissioned. So there's three things: laid down, launched, and commissioned. Commissioned is when they basically have entry into active service.
Yeah, they smashed the champagne bottle.
And then that was November 15th, 1932. So we are well prior to World War II. So this is one of the ships that are being built. It's not like if you think of the USS Missouri and you see those sleek lines and she's just a sexy, beautiful ship. You look back at something like the Indianapolis and it's more traditional that you would think of like a dreadnought kind of World War I-ish style. It looks bulkier, but because she's a heavy cruiser, less weight for guns, because I think her max armament was, she had 9 8-inch guns. Comparing that to like the Missouri, she had 16-inch guns. And I was looking at the comparison of the shells. A 16-inch shell is about the height of an average guy. So I'll just say me, 5'9". It's as tall. That's the shell. And then you look at an 8-inch shell, and honestly, it might come up to like my thigh or my knee. So it's insane, just even the size difference on those. But she had 9 of those in 3 turrets. So it was, if you look at it also, and I know I'm tangenting here, but if you look at it compared to a regular battleship that you're familiar with, you saw images of it?
Yeah.
How far out the turrets were, like toward the front and the back. Whereas in another battleship, they're all tucked in toward the center, so they can have that citadel of armor to protect that whole area. So Indianapolis had 2 turrets in the front, both with 3 8-inch guns, 3 8-inch guns each, and then 1 in the back, as a traditional kind of battleship setup would. She had 8 5-inch guns, 24 44 millimeter, what they call Bofors. They're like an anti-aircraft gun. Because again, she's a battleship, she's going to have a lot of anti-aircraft armament because part of her job is to be kind of a screen for aircraft carriers, things like that. The guns were in 6 quad mounts. So like the cool, like when you see in a anti-aircraft and you see they're sitting in the chair with the 4 gun. Yeah, it's that kind of shit.
That's awesome.
1920 millimeter cannons, which were basically the ones that the guys would have the little shoulder things and go into and just be able to fire up in the air. And then 2 aircraft catapults, and they had 4 aircraft, so they could launch out, send messages, do scouting, things like that.
I love that that's the last thing that you put in there. And just to continue on this tangent, what was the most valuable ship that we'd always talked about in the Pacific War?
Aircraft carriers.
Yeah. This ain't an aircraft carrier, buddy.
No.
This is something that was used to, yes, shoot down with the anti-aircraft guns, but this was specifically made for, as you're coming in for a landing, you need to lay that fire down on the beach to knock out all those
All bombardment.
Yes.
That's what it is. It's ship-to-ship combat and ship-to-land bombardment.
So while the aircraft carrier is so important and so precious, in order for an aircraft carrier to be protected, to be able to launch those planes, you have to have things like the Indianapolis in the water to protect them.
Well, that's what you would have like the aircraft carrier in the center of the fleet. And we're going to talk about how like fleet strength and things like that are so important, not just because it protects something, but in case a ship goes down. So you would have the aircraft carrier in the center, and then in circles going out from it, you would have these defensive ships. So I believe it would be aircraft carrier in the center, then back out a little bit into the first ring, and that would be like your battleships. The ones that could just, because planes are having to come in lower at that point as they get closer, that's where you're putting up all of your heavy fire. And then as you go out, heavy cruisers, then as you go out further, destroyers or whatever it is.
And then you have the dual usage in this ship to be able to pull up into a bay, lay fire on the ground. I can't believe that I heard the term rolling bombardment again after we talked about the just sad
Like creeping
failures of
barrage
World
and
War
stuff
I.
like that. Yeah, because you're also supporting these marine landings because you're in the Pacific.
But I would like to say that the creeping barrages worked better in World War II than they did in World War I.
There was a further distance that they could creep. It's a little bit better. So this thing's 610 feet long, 66 feet wide at the widest point. Crazy max speed of 37.6 miles per hour.
It's so fast on the water.
That's fucking hauling.
Cruising.
And a range of 13,000 nautical miles. So max speed is different than cruising speed. You know, you're going to maximize your output and stuff like that. She was actually outfitted as a fleet flagship. And you're like, well, what does that mean? Basically, a fleet flagship is created with extra space because it has to hold command and its staff. So how a flagship situation would work, and I can't speak to if it was the same for the Japanese, German Navy, British Navy, or whatever. In the United States, you would have your people that were in charge of the fleets themselves, like your rear admirals, your admirals, and those guys would select out of that fleet a flagship. That flagship would not be theirs in the sense of like, hey, I'm now the captain of this ship. That's just the ship I'm stationed on. It has to be something that is survivable, going to be in the thick of the action, and most of the time had some level of prestige to it to be their flagship.
It carried some of the more important people in a battle, right?
Probably the most important people in the battle. Yeah. So there was, it would be battleships sometimes even kind of later in the war it would be aircraft carriers. But this one was designed basically as a command ship. It still had a captain. That captain was in charge of the ship.
Yep.
So he got to dictate what went on the ship. The admiral, whoever was in charge of the fleet, was basically like, okay, but I'm going to give you an order that everyone's moving to this direction. And then they would control the fleet itself. Went out and did its like shakedown and training runs, had to make sure everything worked, that, the engines were reliable, all that good stuff. And I think the maximum amount of crew was it could hold about 2,000 crew when operating as a flagship, because it would have so many more people on it for the staff of the command structure.
And the versatility, we're going to talk about this thing getting refitted like 3 or 4 times during this whole entirety. And refitting would mean different gun emplacements, different things like that. There was a portion where they said most of the deck was actually covered in teak and wood, but they would strip it down to keep it basically lighter, I believe, was the idea, so it could move faster. But in turn, it made it more slippery on the deck because it was just steel that these dudes were walking on.
Oh, yeah.
So they would joke about how it was like being on an ice skating rink if you weren't down there where the teak was to be able to get any sort of grip or traction.
Huh.
Not to mention, this ship travels in so many different places to where you're up in the Aleutian Islands. We'll talk about the Aleutian Island campaign. You're up there where it's fucking freezing cold, where you're having to beat ice off of the rails and everything like that, as far as to go down to escort people to Australia.
Yeah.
So all of these different types of climate, weather, water, it's going through everything.
So this actually serves as kind of the shuttle service for FDR. So when he's wanting to travel down to South America, when he's wanting to kind of go anywhere that he has to go across the ocean or, travel by sea, he's using the Indianapolis. It's the new shiny ship. It's one of the biggest in the fleet. Like you said, it's like the second of these Portland class heavy cruisers. And it had the extra room so he could have, his presidential staff and everything like that.
They said that it had like an ice cream parlor on it. It had a full soda fountain where they listed like all of the different drinks you could get.
And it's because it was a fleet carrier, because they wanted to be able to have the command staff, and the admiral was like, I want some amenities on board.
Well, and it makes total sense because when you're out at sea for that long, if you don't get some creature comforts, you're just going to go nuts. You have to have some feeling of home. You have to be able to taste ice cream when it's 120 degrees on the deck.
That was so crazy going down into the Missouri when I was on the tour.
Yeah.
And walking past the bakery and then going past the ice cream parlor and everything and just being like, everything is so small and condensed and everything. And it's just like, yeah, I guess you would have to have these little bits of you would want to have a fresh baked biscuit, or you would want to have, ice cream that could keep you from losing your mind, especially when you walk up on the deck and you're just like, where's the land?
And could you imagine working a full night shift and just hating the world and walking down below deck and smelling fresh pastries? It's got to just be that little slice of humanity.
Well, not killing myself today.
Yeah, exactly. 1932, as we're talking about this, 1936 times, we're not at war, as Chris pointed out. So FDR embarks on this good neighbor tour of South America in 1936, where he goes down to Brazil, visits Rio de Janeiro, goes to Buenos Aires, goes to Montevideo in Uruguay. They do this thing called the Crossing the Line ceremony on November 26th of that year, where you are crossing the equator. And when you cross the line ceremony, you have to offer yourself for safe passage to King Neptune. So even though we're in a military ship going on a political tour, you still run into these just crazy old naval myths.
And that's held over from Rome, because Neptune was obviously the Roman knockoff of Poseidon. So kind of praying to Poseidon as well.
Yeah, it's so interesting. We're going to fast forward into some wartime activities. December 7th, 1941. I'm sure you've heard of it before. The Indianapolis was actually stationed in Pearl Harbor December, I believe it was 5th, 1941. December 7th, 1941, the Indy was out from Pearl Harbor. They were conducting a mock bombardment of a place called Johnson Atoll.
I think it was like 941 miles west, so further out into the Pacific from Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, and this happens during the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. These were the ships that we were talking about that might have saved us in this Pacific War because they were out on maneuvers and not in harbor.
So they get the call in that the attack on Pearl is happening. There was a response for any of those ships that were around Pearl, anyone that could get underway and actually be usable, to go fucking hunt the fleet. Go find out where all these aircraft. We know where the aircraft came from. They were from carriers. We know carriers aren't the fastest, but we know that they're obviously somewhere in the area within range. So Indianapolis gets a call. It's with other ships at this point, like it should be. It's probably with some destroyers, some other cruisers, and they go on the hunt for the Japanese fleet. They don't know where they're at. They're just basically be like, hey, the planes came from this direction. We think they might be over here. Just put out feelers and see if anyone can see anything.
Yeah. By December 13th, they were back into Pearl Harbor. I can't imagine the feeling of pulling back into Pearl Harbor.
I texted you and I asked you that. I was like, what does that feel like? So you leave Pearl Harbor on the 5th. It's Hawaii, man. We're not at wartime, which means the docks are, just kind of probably, it's all structured, but it's probably less of a hectic environment.
Yeah.
And
more of that Hawaiian atmosphere you would expect.
Yeah, exactly. It's beautiful, blue water and everything. You go out, you get to fire off the big guns. Hey, we're going to practice blowing some shit up, boys. Hurrah. All of a sudden you get a call come in, hey, Pearl Harbor's been hit. You don't know, especially the crew, they don't know what the severity, they just know they got orders to then, hey, we might be hunting some Japanese ships. They go out, they look, all of a sudden they don't find them. They turn around 6 days later and they pull into Pearl Harbor.
Not to aside you, we got to jump right back into that. But did you ever hear anything about how long the cleanup inside the harbor took? Because invariably, when you sink those ships in that water and the oil starts leaking out, because isn't the water in the bay clear enough to where you can see some of the wreckage, like down through a glass bottom boat?
I'm not, like, I went from, where they load you in the boats. Yeah. Kind of directly across to the memorial, and then from the memorial they take you to let you off where like the Missouri is.
But was the water fairly clear?
It was kind of a little bit of a choppy day.
Okay.
But looking down, it's pretty dark, but I can't tell if that's because it's kicking up everything. I'm sure there are portions of that probably aren't traveled as well, that probably aren't clear. It's Hawaii. Other places that I went to on the beaches, yeah, the water's pretty freaking clear.
But you'd have to think that once that happened, there would have to be cleanup after
it took
in the harbor.
Dude, it took so long. Every ship that got hit was leaking oil.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about that in a second. It just stays on top of it. It burns if it gets lit on fire. When you're rolling in 6 days later, it is still fucking chaos. You saw it perfect when you left, and 6 days later you come back. And you probably have heard some stories come down through the pipeline. Hey, we heard it's bad. Your mind probably can't wrap your head around that. You're going past ships that you're seeing them overturned. There's guys on the top of them with grinders and air hammers trying to, open holes to pull guys out. I don't even know how to describe that. But also think of like from, when they talked about Pearl Harbor, is that sense of like duty to the country, patriotism and everything. Think of seeing that from that perspective and being like, we got fucking hit.
But then that feeling of a little bit of luck.
Oh yeah. Like the first round of survivor's guilt.
Yeah. You're just like, thank God I wasn't here when this happened. But then it kicks in. You're like, but there were people here. My friends were here.
And in your head, you're thinking, the sixth happens or the seventh happens. You get the order to go hunt the ships. As the crew, you're like, are we at war?
Yeah.
Like what just we just heard Pearl Harbor got bombed. We're at war now. You get back to Pearl and you're like, oh, we're really at war. And then also, and I know I'm just like focused in on this, psychologically think of this. you have probably believed that you've been in Pearl Harbor, you've seen all of our ships, you're like, we're so fucking money.
Yeah.
Like, look how powerful we are. You just saw what the Japanese did, how many ships have been knocked out, and now it's like, oh, we're at war.
In one day.
And we're hurt this bad. Like, look how many ships are knocked out.
Yeah.
Look at this place that's supposed to be our safe place in the Pacific.
They reached out and they touched us.
All right, moving on. So now we're into World War II.
Yep. December 13th, they end up joining something called Task Force 11. The task force would steam into the South Pacific. They would escort the aircraft carrier Lexington. February 20th, 1942, the ships were attacked by 18 Japanese aircraft. The 18 were wiped out by planes from the Lexington, so thank God they were there. There was a couple that were mopped up by anti-aircraft fire on the other ships. But this is just showing why you travel in packs.
Exactly. And the crazy thing about, like, when you watch a movie that you see, like, sea battle, but airplanes and everything.
Yep.
It's just constantly fire is just flying up. I don't know how
Tracer rounds are going like crazy.
When you hear about how many planes get shot down by anti-aircraft fire from some of these battleships, you're just kind of like, oh, really? Because it's like, we got our first two this day that we shot down. It's like, but there were a lot of planes up there. You're like, well, yeah, but they're kind of focused also on the aircraft carrier, so we're shooting them at a distance and everything. But still, constantly, just everything's going off at one time.
Yeah. When you do that close to land, you can't have guys on the ground, right? Well, because those shots that you're firing, even if they're missing, they're arcing and eventually hitting somewhere.
You're not close to land when you're having those battles. So think of it this way. Land means that there could be an airfield there, which means that there can be ground-based aircraft. You want as few aircraft as possible to be able to reach you, but you have to be able to be close enough that your aircraft can reach them. So it's this game of, we're going to get close. We're not going to be anywhere near in sight of land, and we're going to have our screening force around us. That way, the land-based aircraft can't get to us or have a harder time. We don't want to be in visual sight of land.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of like landing parties.
Correct. So when they came in to do shore bombardment duty, you would still have your aircraft carriers way out. They would just have less of a screening force, or you would be assigned not part of that screening force. You're like, okay, you guys are off screening duty. Okay. You're actually going to be closer to the island and actually be on bombardment duty. We'll send in some other ships that, don't have as large of main guns.
Yeah.
Because yours are, more needed to actually, bomb or pound the land.
That makes more sense. March 10th of that same year, 1942, the task forces surprised Japanese forces that were attempting an amphibious landing in New Guinea. So their Japanese have this stronghold in the South Pacific. They are trying to build that inter-Asiatic Japanese League or whatever it is.
Co-prosperity fear, whatever they call it, sphere.
Task force rolls up on them in the middle of this, and it ends up stopping this amphibious landing. The Japanese can't get a hold of New Guinea at this point in time, and this is kind of like the first affront in the Pacific War of the Japanese being denied something. Mm-hmm. Up until then, the Japanese were rolling through everything.
Well, remember, Pearl Harbor wasn't just the one thing that they did. It was the largest thing that they did during that. But that kicked off the invasion and the attack of all the British colonies, all the French colonies. I think a German colony got thrown in there actually that they hit. And they're just trying to widen this defensive net and snatch up all they can. So New Guinea is close to Australia.
Yeah, very, very, very close. It would return after that to Mare Island Naval Shipyard for a refit. I believe Mare Island is
kind of San Fran.
Okay, in that area.
Yeah.
It might be across the bay from San Fran, I believe.
Mare Island is actually the first U.S. naval base on the West Coast.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a fun fact. Yeah. The Indy would then escort a convoy. It's early for that in the
I'd
episode.
like to convey that there was a convoy.
To Australia before heading to the North Pacific to support the U.S. units during the Battle of the Aleutian Islands. So you travel in this convoy all the way down to the beautiful, warm waters of Australia. You don't go over and touch the Indian because the Indian's kind of scary waters, but you go all the way down there only to circle back and go to the Aleutian Islands.
Always nothing but sunshine and blue skies on this trip, right?
So as I was talking about before, you're going from just these extremes to where you're not wearing a shirt on deck up to where you have to have wool-lined clothing.
We've always wondered why there was that room with jackets.
It didn't make any sense in the South. Now it makes total sense.
So we're not going to get a ton into the Aleutian Island campaign because the Indianapolis needs the full attention on this one, but it's not really talked about because not a lot happened, but some stuff, did occur. But yeah, the Japanese were taking control of like the Alaskan islands, just trying to widen this as much as possible and deny pretty much it to the United States to be able to strike back.
Well, it's a foothold in North America.
Yeah, exactly. So you have and I think it was New Guinea was February to March of 1942.
Yep.
Aleutian Island campaign was somewhere August 42 to mid 43. But as they're up there, like you said, sunshine and heat to, hey, wake up, we got to go bang the ice off of the rails and off of the cables and everything like that.
Yeah. August 7th. So also, you're up there during the wrong time of year. If August 7th is when you show up, it's only going to get colder.
We've all seen Deadliest Catch.
Yeah. The Indy and the task force attacked Kiska Island. They would end up sinking Japanese ships that were in the harbor. They damaged all these shore installations. The operation was a success as the Japanese subs were even depth charged. We got everything on land. We cleaned out all of these major ships. And then the submarines that are still dinking down there, we're just dropping depth charges left and right.
But that's also the advantage of we still have bases up there to some degree, and it's closer to us. The Japanese are having to stretch their arm out to this.
They achieved occupation on Adak Island, creating this closer naval base, just as you were talking about, to the islands, because the closest place up there was Dutch Harbor, where you just mentioned Deadliest Catch. That's where everybody leaves out of is Dutch Harbor. So now we're in the islands. We have this naval base that's stationed within the islands. Instead of having to drop off at Dutch Harbor and then cruise up from Dutch Harbor there, we can just go straight there.
You got to imagine that would be so. Join the Navy, see the world. We'll talk about that a little bit, about some of the reasons why these guys do that. Join the Navy, a girl in every port. And then you find out you're assigned to the naval base up in Adak Island. And you're just like, where's that? And they're like, oh my God, that sounds like so tropical. They're like, it's actually Alaska. You're like, the fuck? And you just spend your time up there, freezing your ass off.
Adak Island, is that somewhere in the South Pacific? That's actually an Inuit word. Where are the Inuit? Fuck, Alaska? No.
It's more North Pacific? Oh, so like kind of up near Hawaii? More North Pacific.
Well, the other thing is, too, if you're stationed at Dutch Harbor, you're thinking, there's no way I'm ever going to see any action. Like, I'm safe up here. And then all of a sudden, a week later, you get a cable that's like, the Japanese are in the Aleutian Islands. Like, fuck! I thought I was going to be safe.
So we get into 43. Mid 43, things have gone well up there. She's sent back to the South Pacific for a little bit, which, oh man, you got to imagine as soon as the crew saw the ship turn and start heading that direction, like, are we heading south? We're heading south. And then just to get warmer and warmer and warmer, that had to be just, oh.
Well, before that, so January 43, I just mentioned this because it seems like a pretty big blow in the Aleutian Islands campaign, but the Indy supported the landings and occupations of this place called Amchitka, and it helped the Aleutian basically land hopping campaign. But then the Indy ends up sinking this Japanese cargo ship that was carrying troops, munitions, and supplies. So you basically get a threefer. Just in this one ship that they're sending up there, you're getting all three of these knocked out in this big, gigantic cargo ship.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I can't remember if I heard the information correctly, but didn't they even like hail the ship?
Yeah.
To be like, hey, stop what you're fucking doing. But they didn't hail back. And so they're like, fucking blow it up.
Yeah, Japanese don't move. They continue on. It's just such a fascinating thing to know that they were that close. Like, we talk about Pearl Harbor as a very pivotal, important moment. They got closer than Pearl Harbor. They were technically they were in an island chain that was connected to North America.
Well, it wasn't even just like, hey, we reached out and we bombed Pearl Harbor. They're like, oh no, we have guys like boots on the ground.
Yep. Yeah, we're on your land. There was another refitting after that at Mare Island. The Indy then moves to Hawaii as a flagship for Vice Admiral Ray Spruance. his Fifth Fleet. We've talked about Spruance quite a bit. I remember his name popping up. The Fifth Fleet was, I think, fairly famous in the Pacific War, and we have the Indy becoming the flagship for it.
So when they go back for these refittings, they're basically being like, hey, what worked, what didn't work. It's also a chance to upgrade things that have kind of advanced from like a technological standpoint. So as they're reporting back, being like, well, some planes got over us. These other ships have reported that these armaments have been working. So they're coming in, they're like, we're going to replace this. We're actually going to add this and this. So when this thing is like first sent out, even at the very beginning of World War II, it's lacking the things that it's eventually going to have come the time, 44, 45. So as they keep coming in, it's not a lot of like, hey, we're going to remove this or this. It's like, we need more guns on the deck. And it actually kind of affects this thing in a way because it starts to become a little bit top heavy.
Yeah.
It's not going to be crucial to what actually happens to the ship, but that just kind of lets you know they're like, we're just stacking shit on the deck as far as more guns.
Well, it also shows you how fast the military industrial complex works.
Yeah.
Because these guys are popping in for these refits that are taking a month, maybe 2 at the most. I mean, when we talk about the Kamikaze and what it did, it only took them a couple months to get this thing fit to go back out onto water.
Yeah.
Just so fast.
So as the flagship of the Fifth Fleet, November 10th, it leaves Pearl Harbor to take part in the invasion of the Gilbert Islands. Once it gets down there, it's just going to be zooming around the South Pacific and like the South China Sea and that whole area. November 19th, it participates in the bombardment of Tarawa. November 20th, it pounded a place called Macon, which was kind of part of the same little island chain. November 21st, back to Tarawa to do more bombardments. And then by November 24th, they had the island secure.
Only took 3 days of support fire to get this thing under control.
And I mean, at this, like when it's doing these bombardments, I would like to know kind of what is going on the ship. Of course, you have the guys that are inside the turrets that are constantly loading and firing. You have the fire control officers that are up on the bridge or up on the fire control deck that are calling out targets and trying to spot little puffs of smoke coming out of other artillery that they're going to aim at. But then is anyone on the deck at this point? Because think of those guns going off constantly. Like, you'd be deaf in no time, right? There's got to be kind of a more... No, you have all the guys manning the anti-aircraft fucking guns.
Well, and as soon as he said it, that's what I was thinking, was people's ears just didn't stand a chance back then. I don't know what technology was to be able to plug ears. I'm sure they were big headphones or big over-ear covers.
There has got to be some type of data on, like, armed forces hearing loss.
Yeah.
The Navy had to be the highest. That are aircraft mechanics, maybe.
A good chance. Somewhere around there, but at the same time, you have to think if they're not... I guess nobody's in a compressed area, though.
Everyone's wearing ear protection, but I believe also that was where the communication systems were set up to where they were able to call out to certain, like, gun emplacements to be like, hey, fighters on this direction, bombers this direction.
You got to think they had a cut on their microphone, too, because they have to relay information back.
Yeah.
Could you imagine being on the other end, sitting up in the brig, and just hearing...
Maybe they didn't for that reason. And there was just hand signals and stuff to like their loaders to be like here, or it was just so well. I bet it was just so well oiled that there was just a constant movement and they were only receiving information.
Just somebody talking into everybody's ears. That makes way more sense because there's no way that you could figure out that noise. So this flagship it's got to be at all of these different places. We end up having them, like you just said, they took Tarawa, they end up taking Macon. As soon as that happens, they're moving again as the flagship for the conquest of the Marshall Islands. The time frame in this really kind of blows me away just because it seems like you have little spurts. But again, if this is November 19th, we're headed into January 31st, you have to move. And the Pacific Ocean is so big that it's going to take a little bit of time.
That's why you're getting all these battles of these islands that you would have never heard about had there not been a battle there. And, kind of inside baseball stuff, you also are carrying a certain amount of shells, of arms, of things like that. So you have ships that are hanging back on the fleet that are these resupply ships that are basically there to either refuel or try to resupply arms. As these little islands are taken, you're basically setting up refueling and, rearming stations of these just cargo ships that are sitting in these little atolls and everything. So you have this time during these battles where these ships are just zooming out to get refueled or to get rearmed because they're just constantly launching bombardments. Do you have anything before January 31st of 44?
Nope.
So we're in January, or we're into 44. End of January, they bombard this place called I'm going to pronounce this horribly.
I was waiting for you to do this one.
Kwajalein Atoll?
Yeah, that sounds beautiful.
Okay, I'm sure it's not pronounced like that. They end up bombarding that. Again, even taking these little areas that are these atolls, little spits of land that kind of surround in a circle. Hey, that's safe, man. You can put up some defenses there, keep some cargo ships. They're trying to take anything that they can while also denying anything that they possibly can for the Japanese to use these in the same way.
We have to put the sphere of protection that the Japanese have created.
It's the giant creeping barrage is what it is. We're just constantly moving forward and trying to push them back.
And you get into these areas where there are enough islands to where you can just start hopping in between them. Mm-hmm. the Indianapolis can shuttle back and forth, and maybe in between going back and forth is when they hit the resupply ship. Mm-hmm. And then they hit the resupply ship in the same place going back the other direction.
Yeah. So March to April of 44, they're participating on the attack on the Western Carolines, which are north of New Guinea. So it's New Guinea. I believe New Guinea at some point was taken, right?
I don't think it was, because they ended up shutting it down the first time.
Okay. Up to June 13th, they played a major role in the Battle of Saipan. June 19th, Battle of the Philippine Sea. This is the Great Mariana Turkey Shoot.
Yeah.
This is
a fuzz before that. The 5th flagship, Indy, attacked the Western Carolines and Peleliu Islands. And Peleliu will kind of pop back into this. Before turning to Yap and Ulithi and Walea in the area that are all struck. The Indy ends up shooting down its second Japanese plane, which was a torpedo bomber. I believe the first one that they had shot down was in the Gilbert Islands. So I'm sure, just as anybody else wants to take credit for this kind of stuff, shooting down a plane for one of these guys has to be a pretty big deal, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's a major victory for that ship to be able to say, and if you launch 100 of these things in the air and you take down one, it doesn't seem like a big victory, but that's one more plane that could end up blowing up something very important.
Oh, yeah. And again, the numbers aren't like impressive, because if you go to the Mariana Turkey shoot, they shoot down like 400 plus Japanese planes.
And that's why I wanted to get that one in there first.
Okay, so here's the rational part of my brain trying to justify this. When you're this screening force, you're launching your bombers, you're launching your like high level bombers coming in to try to bomb like the carriers, things like that. Those planes are probably hard to shoot because they're high. Dive bombers are coming from high altitude coming down. You're going after the torpedo bombers because they have to get low. If one is getting close enough to you, that could actually shoot you down because it's already that low and everything. So I think it's also part of the deterrent. I think it's more of a deterrent because you're like, planes cannot get this low when they're this close because we are just setting up this screening force. So it's to keep them, I think, just from having an easy way in.
Yeah. I also you triggered that back in my mind when you had said that back to the Pacific episode. I believe in New Guinea, the south was still protected, but the Japanese had the north because there was an inlet that they were trying to get down in. Because, they ended up interfering with Japanese response to U.S. landings in New Guinea to try to take that area over. And it's just basically they're not playing defense anymore. The art of surprise that the Japanese had for so long is now shifting over to the U.S. side.
We're in 44. I mean, that's the whole point is like, it sounds like, they were up in the Aleutian Islands for a little while and they just worked their way down because there's a lot of stuff, just rapid fire going on in the Pacific. I mean, the Pacific is the longer standing engagement that the United States are in the war. Because again, we're not in the war until North Africa, until D-Day, things like that. So at this point, this is when the Japanese are starting to this is after Midway. This is when the Japanese are on their heels. So this is why they're also having such success on these island hopping campaigns and like Battle of the Philippine Sea, where you've lost a lot of your air crews from the Japanese Navy. You're putting up a lot of untrained or not very well-trained pilots. And you end up getting a day when I think, like we were saying, 400 plus Japanese aircraft are shot down.
426.
To the losses of how many for the other?
29.
Yes. You had guys that just become aces, multiple aces on this day going up and taking out these untrained pilots. And this is also where we're getting a lot of kamikaze action going on too, correct?
Yeah, well, and an amazing part of this is the Fifth Fleet showing up and assaulting in the Marianas Islands and the raids on Saipan on June 11th. The Indy plays this major bombardment role in Saipan starting on June 13th. The reason that the turkey shoot becomes so effective is because we're clearing out all of these islands and stopping them from being able to launch more support. So while saying 429 planes is a lot to shoot down, the reason that they're getting shot down so frequently is because they're not getting support from these other islands. These are just planes that are being launched off of Japanese carriers.
Smaller groups.
Yeah.
And here's the thing too. You don't have to get shot down over the battle. You get damaged enough not to make it all the way back to the island that you do have or all the way back to that carrier. That's a loss.
Yeah. If you can't land on the islands we just took.
We might not even know it's a loss. But at the same time, that doesn't matter to you. You can't replace that.
Yeah. The turkey shoot's a very fun thing that I would like to dig into more. I don't know how much there is on it, how long of an episode we could get out of it.
The Battle of the Philippine Sea is big.
Yeah.
It's an engagement that I think took weeks. So there would definitely be enough there to do an episode of leading up to this. This is just kind of the crescendo of it.
The turkey shoots, it's just such a fun name to put on something, and to think that they're talking about human lives as a turkey shoot.
Yeah. I mean, and it comes off just a guy coming back home. He's like, this is just like a good old fashioned turkey shoot back home.
Yeah. That ends up happening near Guam in Tinian. Again, two major parts of this story. The Indy would return to Saipan on the 23rd to resume fire support for 6 days before moving to Tinian to fire on the shore installations there. Then the Indy was the first ship to enter something called the Apra Harbor after Guam was taken. So prior to the wars and everything like that, we had landed a few ships in Guam, but the first one into Apra Harbor in Guam is the Indianapolis. It's the flagship.
Yep.
That's the one that shows up. We plant the flag back. Guam's ours again, bitch. We're coming for you.
That was the first ship that had gone into the harbor since it was taken first in that, that surprise assault at the beginning of the war.
September 12th to the 29th, the India bombards Peleliu. Again, we're back into it. Before and after the landings in Guam. So, like you're talking about, they're zooming back and forth. They're hitting into Apra Harbor after helping to bombard in Guam. Then they're running over to Tinian. They're hitting Tinian. Then they're running back to Guam. They're just all over in the South Pacific cleaning up these places. And it's because that's their necessary job. They can't just sit stationary in one place because they're just trying to put as many fires on these islands as possible.
And there's also command staff. Like, I need to have my eyes on everything.
Yeah.
Operations in the Marianas would continue for the next few weeks. They would sail around north of New Guinea, just basically kind of securing the area, making sure there were no renewed counterattacks or anything like that for 10 days before then going back again to Mare Island, which is Vallejo, California, is where it's
Vallejo.
at, for another refitting. This would include yet another upgrade to anti-aircraft defenses, which, I'm sure after Marianas and everything like that, they're like, what's been working really well is all the guns. So, just throw some more on there. And then also including an upgrade to the fire control radar. So fire control radar, I think when we've talked about like the Midway episode, we've said like fire control systems. I feel like that applies to multiple things, like putting out fires. Mm-hmm. When it comes to like a warship, as far as like a battleship, I think that refers more to the fire. Like, this is how we narrow in on a target, aim the big guns.
Okay, so like watching an explosion from a turret from somewhere else.
More of like controlling where the guns are going to go. Like being like, you're going to hit this coordinate or whatever, and then like it's a fire directing is what it is.
Gotcha. We've heard about the Indy speed, bouncing back and forth. The next place the Indy is going to go is into Vice Admiral Mark Mitchker's Fast Carrier Task Force on February 14th, 1945. We're getting into it.
We're 45, baby.
Yeah. 2 days later, they launched an attack on Tokyo to cover the February 19th landing in Iwo Jima that were already planned. I believe this is the first time that we reached out and touched Tokyo since Doolittle raid.
Yeah. So
Another great episode. Go back and listen to it if you haven't heard. Our World War II catalog is getting fucking thick.
Yes. So I don't know the exact particulars of the capacity that it served during this. So when you're participating on this attack on Tokyo, I feel like there were aircraft carriers involved. At this point in the war, it kind of seems like that was probably inevitable, and they're launching aircraft against it while the aircraft are staying back, and the Indianapolis is providing probably fire support. I don't think we did a direct bombardment on Tokyo itself, like from naval guns or anything, but it still ends up, and also that would require the planes from the Japanese mainland from around Tokyo to come out further. That bombardment and that attack on Tokyo ends up costing 499 enemy planes. It sinks a carrier, Japanese carrier, destroys 9 coastal ships, a destroyer, 2 escorts, and a cargo ship, to only 49 American planes lost.
Wow. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe their main goal during this is to just try to bombard the naval yards.
It's more of a surprise attack, too, because if you're parking way out and you're launching planes in, same thing with the Doolittle raid. You're parking way out, you're sending the planes in, you're catching them by surprise. You're catching the carrier at harbor, you're catching these coastal ships, and you're catching these planes on the ground. By the time you need to then pull back, you already got your, fighter protection above your aircraft carrier. Enemy tries to send out planes and they just get shot down too. And then you launch another raid against Tokyo.
They come over the horizon looking for the ships, and all of a sudden they see all of them and think, shit.
No. So after that, they haul ass to support the landings at Iwo Jima on March 1st. So they are just moving again. March 24th, they are assigned to Task Force 54 and spent 7 days shelling beach defenses on Okinawa.
Yeah.
So again, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, she is at the big ones.
Well, even in between that, you have them attacking the mainland, attacking Tokyo. Task Force races to the Bonin Islands, supports Iwo Jima. They end up racing back in between there for another little foray.
Attack on Tokyo, right?
In Tokyo again, yeah. And then they come back to March 1st. And so they hit February 25th, they hit Tokyo again. So you have Tokyo being like, oh, God, go to Iwo Jima. Just go over there. We'll meet you guys there.
Reprieve. Psych.
Nope. They come right back. Next target becomes Okinawa. Fast carrier force attacks airfields in southern Japan, which is a brilliant strategy to render them incapable of responding to this impending invasion on Okinawa. Okinawa is sort of where things changed for Task Force 54 and for the Indy specifically.
Isn't that where Mr. Miyagi was from?
I could hear him saying it.
I think Daniel-san went to Okinawa in Second Karate Kid.
Oh, is that where he does his training?
You're the best around.
They end up starting the bombardment in Okinawa on March 24th. The Indy spent a week just slamming the island with these 8-inch shells. As Chris was talking about, they're not the biggest shells that they have, but damn are they effective. The Indy shoots down 6 planes and damages 2 others. So again, we're just marking tallies inside the bridge of all these planes that we're taking down.
This is old hat for them.
Yeah.
They've been around. They know they got this shit dialed in.
And then we run into March 31st, a day before the 10th Army landings. A Ki-43 fighter dies. The way to hit, what was it?
You know how they gave him names like Kate's, Zeros? This is an Oscar.
Oh, Oscar feels like a weird Japanese word.
Well, it's not.
It's the American.
Yeah, it's what we called them.
Oscar. To hear some of the people on board talk about just how tough it was to spot this guy, it was almost like he came out of the sun.
They did that. That was a tactic, like a fighter tactic and everything. You would come out of the sun because you would be on them before they knew what was going on.
Yeah, and the sun's behind you, so it's not in your eyes.
And especially as a lone fighter, the sound eventually is going to give you away, but with a ship, churning through the water and everything, it's probably going to take some time. Mm-hmm. But if they can't spot you, you're holding the bomb. The closer you get to that ship, the higher your chances of hitting it are. So he ends up diving out of the sun.
I would say in this situation, it might have been bad that he dropped it so low.
No, not as far as he's concerned.
Yeah, I guess, well, his concern only lasted a moment longer.
There's not a lot of time for that. So comes out of the sun. the anti-aircraft fire lights up, but they can't shoot it in time, and it ends up dropping a bomb from 25 feet up. So obviously the plane does not pull up. It doesn't hit. The plane ends up getting knocked off to the side.
Yeah, they're firing 20 millimeter guns at it, and it was just enough to cause him to swerve at the end. But yeah, you're releasing a bomb 25 feet. I mean, 25 feet's nothing.
No, and you have all your speed of the dive and all the weight and momentum of the bomb. So it hits pretty far back on the ship. I want to say if you're dividing it into like sections, the last tenth of the ship, it ends up hitting that, and because of the momentum of the bomb, it goes through the deck and just keeps going, goes down however many levels it is.
Through the deck, through the mess hall, through the berthing compartment. I don't know who's giving birth on these ships.
BERTH. I think it's sleeping quarters.
Oh, okay. Okay. I wrote BIRTH, so that's clearly wrong. Goes through the fuel tanks.
They might have practiced animal husbandry on the show. I don't know.
It goes through the keel, man. And it doesn't stop until it explodes against the ship's screws.
Yeah, the shaft, because it is a solid, just round piece of metal. So it penetrates the entire, just through the lip, finally hits the shaft. And I want to say, I keep saying shaft, but on the way that they describe it, because they say it came out the bottom of the ship. Yep. So it was out in the water when it hit. So it's at that point where on the ship, the shaft has exited the actual hull, the structure of the ship, and is stretching out toward where the screws are the propellers are at the very end. It hits this, it ends up damaging the propeller shafts, rupturing fuel tanks, destroys the water distillers aboard, and they have some flooding and everything like that because there's a fucking hole, but there was also an explosion that kind of ripped apart the bottom of it a little bit. And even with a 17-degree list, if I'm just saying that, it doesn't mean... Did you look up what a 17-degree list looks like?
I've walked on a 17-degree incline before on a treadmill. I know how shitty that is.
It's a big list.
Yeah.
It's a pretty significant... They said to the point where, like, you had to be very careful walking. It's like side-hilling to a degree.
Well, the other kind of crazy thing about this is you would think after it blows 2 gaping holes into the keel, this thing ends up killing 9 people. So there's a loss of life probably in those berthing compartments as there were people below deck and maybe in the mess hall. Probably not in the mess hall. But these holes end up flooding these compartments inside the ship. And it's... as soon as I heard this, I was like, how does that happen? How do you blow holes in the bottom of a ship and it still continues to go on? But they have these compartments that are built specifically for this to be able to take on water, but they not release.
Yeah, so everything has, just like traveling through the ship, there are normal doors.
Yeah.
But those are going into like an officer's quarters or the doctor's office. The ship itself, if you were to lay it out lengthwise like a hot dog and just make slices down it, there are just bulkheads that go down that, in every bulkhead, a door that goes through there is the ones that are like the thick ones that you can crank down that are watertight.
That have a seal on them.
Yep. So as these, just kind of like when you're watching the movie Titanic, they're trying to get past certain doors and like seal the water. It's exactly like that. Even more so because it's a warship and this is what it's made for. So they can't do anything about the immediate blast. Again, it kills 9 guys. It damages a whole bunch of shit, but they're like, we can't worry about that at this very moment. We need to control the flooding, and then we'll figure out and assess what's going on.
A 17-degree list from just outside of Okinawa all the way back to Mare Island.
Well, it doesn't. So what happens is, which is crazy because that's just hitting the very back of it.
Yeah.
And it still has that sideways list to it that affects the entire ship. It ends up getting to this little place for emergency repairs, and I want to say it was a salvage ship. So it's not like they can get, because they used to have these crazy like portable barges. There was a couple of them in the Pacific at some of these big like atolls.
Yeah.
Where they could raise certain ships up and do almost dry dock repairs on them.
Oh.
The salvage ship is basically just like, we're going to patch you as best we can, but you need to get back somewhere they can get this thing out of the water.
We'll drain the water for you.
Pretty much.
Yeah, but it's on you to get
We're going to
back.
try to, you know what we'll do? We'll try to swim under there and see if we can weld on some steel or something like that with some divers. Maybe, and these things will stick until you get to Mare Island.
Don't go too fast. You might rip the patch off.
So they're able to get to Mare Island with this 17-degree list. this thing undergoes, major repairs as it should, and then a pretty significant overhaul. Again, if we're already got this thing on dry dock, we're repairing the bottom of it. Let's see if we can replace anything that's outdated.
This is what I'm talking about. March 31st, this happens, and they get the hull blown. By July 16th, they already have it completely refitted and ready to go again.
Well, it's not only is it refitted by that point, that was when it was ready to go.
Yeah.
That's not to say that, they steam March 31st. Let's say, what would it take them if they got a 17? I have no idea. I'm just fucking making shit up here. A week and a half to get back to Mare Island if they're being careful.
I would say from Okinawa, it has to be further than that because they're not going fast.
Yeah, that's true. So they end up getting back to, because Pearl Harbor doesn't have these huge repair facilities. It does, but you would think that maybe they would go to Pearl, but instead maybe they didn't need that ship back out there as quickly as possible. They were repairing more of the newer battleships, things like that. They still get back there. They have to get this thing in dry dock. They get this thing fixed and everything. And lo and behold, this fast ship, pretty prestigious ship, it's got a crew that knows what it's doing. This thing just happens to be available, sitting in the continental United States, ready in case, I don't know, something pops up of a secret mission-ish variety.
Yeah. Before we jump into the secret mission, you want to take a bathroom break?
Yep. Cool. Oh my God, Adam. What is that up in the sky? It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's socials! Oh my God. It's faster than Instagram.
That's historically high pod on Instagram.
More powerful than X?
It's historically high, historically HI on X.
Able to leap tall threads in a single bound.
Back to historically high pod on Threads.
And, I guess there's still Gmail, right?
We got that too. That is historically high podcast at gmail.com.
All right, guys, back to the show. Okay, secret mission time. So while they're there, again, she's a fast ship. She ends up getting tapped to transport critical parts for the construction of the Little Boy atomic nuclear device.
We don't know that yet.
No, we don't.
We don't know. July 16th, 1945, the sun rises on the West Coast. The orders have already been given for the crew, the 1,198 sailors, to board the Indy to take off for a potential secret mission. A top secret transport mission of critical shipment material to Tinian Island.
Which no one knows about.
No.
So going back to look at it from like a sailor's perspective that's there. They're at Mare Island. They're getting stuff done. They get orders to ship out. They're just like, oh, I guess we're, the war is still going on to them. They know that there's no end date in sight. They know that they've been following, news about where we've been pushing into, like what we've taken as far as territory. They're assuming at this point that they're probably heading to do something for the invasion of Japan.
That's so interesting to think about, because if you're on that ship fighting over there and you come back for repairs and get leave, do you come home and what news are you seeing about what's going on in the theater that you were just in? Is the news finally just getting back? It's got to be faster than them returning home and all that shit that they heard about that happening. But at the same time, it plays a very interesting point into the news that gets told about the Indianapolis and when the people find out about it.
Yeah.
But you're sitting back on leave while your ship's getting repaired. You have to be keeping an eye on that theater to see, am I even going to have to go back? Are we going to have this thing won before the ship's ready?
Praying that you hear a surrender.
Yeah.
All you're thinking of like, okay, how long is the ship going to be? Okay. And you're just watching there to be like, please tell me they gave up. Please tell me they gave up. Because every day it gets closer. You're like, this ship, if they're not giving up, I know that this ship, what it's been through up to this point, we're going to be involved in some stuff if we eventually have to invade Japan.
And not only that, Axis, Italians surrendered.
Yes.
At this point in time. Germans surrendered at this point in time. All we have left is Japan to surrender to stop World War II.
Yeah.
You're that close that you already saw two major powers surrender. We already have two victories under our belt, and you're just trying to sweep up the third. But you want it swept up before you get your orders to come back to that ship.
Yeah. So from these guys' perspective, they end up leaving Mare Island. The ship is repaired. They probably think they're going to participate in this, or they know they're going back to fighting.
Yeah, they're carrying a 38 or a 39-man Marine detachment, which you're using Marines for landings. You're under Captain Charles B. McVeigh III. Charles McVeigh he's kind of, I would call him royalty at this point in time. Like the ascension of his family lineage, basically. His father, Charles McVeigh Jr., was an admiral of the Navy's Asiatic Fleet. An admiral of the Asiatic Fleet. It's a pretty prestigious title to be carrying. And you have McVeigh trying to walk in his father's footsteps to be just as great as he was.
So this is McVeigh 3.
Yep.
Okay.
As you're sitting there coming back to port, you're loading onto the ship. There were stories that I had heard of everybody going out and having a night of drinking before getting on the ship. I imagine that was probably standard practice to have one wild night in port before you get on the ship. As they're getting on the ship, they see was it one of the side doors of the ship open, like one of the port entries?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. Well, they went from Mare Island, and then they went to Hunters Point.
Okay, Hunters Point is where this takes place.
Hunters Point, San Francisco. So they're in, I think, San Francisco Bay at this point as well. This is where Army trucks actually pull up alongside the ship while it's up at dock and load on a large wooden crate, probably about the size I would think of like a car.
A Cadillac, maybe?
Yeah, maybe like a Cadillac. It was a large wooden crate. This thing ends up getting put in what they consider the port hangar, which I don't really understand that or anything. But it ends up getting put in the port hangar, and then a metal case is brought aboard, placed in Captain McVeigh's cabin, and welded to the floor.
They had to bolt it in and weld it in. The orders were, if they were under attack or the ship was sinking, the first thing to be loaded onto a lifeboat was this package. Mm-hmm. It was the most important thing on the ship of this top secret mission. Just so happens, just by happenstance, there's really no connection to these two things. The Trinity test, that was our first major test of the atomic bomb, takes place hours before this on July 16th in, Nevada?
Yeah. Oh, just going back to McVeigh real quick.
Okay.
So he was captain of the Indianapolis for about 8 months, from November 18th until a date that will a hard date that will be discussed here in just a few moments. So it had multiple captains, but he had been the captain prior to this happening. So it wasn't just like, hey, new captain, repaired ship, who dis?
He took the kamikaze.
Yeah. He was the guy that was there. So he was going to maintain that. So back to that Trinity test when the first nuclear, atomic, whatever you want to call it, device is detonated.
And you would think the Trinity test would directly coincide with the first atomic bomb being dropped in Japan, right? Like you're testing the firing mechanism to light this atomic bomb on fire during the Trinity test, because that would, in theory, be the first mechanism that you're going to be using, right?
Oh, you just wanted to see if it was possible, right? Okay, and here's the thing. There is no way that the Trinity test is it all going to tie into when this ship actually leaves on a super secret clandestine mission, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to happen within hours of the Trinity test happening, right?
We don't have this loaded up and ready to go and waiting just on whatever result this Trinity test is. If the atmosphere does, in fact, not completely light on fire and in human civilization at this test, we might have a ship that's ready to go over to Tinian, which is in reach of Nagasaki.
We're just going to get into this. We've dropped enough hints. It's nuclear bomb components are on this ship. It's components critical for the construction of Little Boy, which is going to be the first atomic bomb that is dropped on Nagasaki. So we now have a bone to pick with this.
Yep.
Because this led us down a little rabbit hole where the bomb that was detonated outside of Alamogordo or whatever it was during the Trinity test.
New Mexico, probably.
It was in New Mexico. That bomb was the same type of bomb as Fat Man, the second bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. Was it Hiroshima first or was it Nagasaki?
I believe it was Nagasaki and then Hiroshima.
Okay.
I think Big Boy or Fat Man.
So
Hiroshima.
Unimportant to this anyway. So that was the type that was tested. It was only one, the Trinity test. It wasn't like we lit one off and then we lit off another one to make sure this other type of bomb would work as well. The type of bomb that Little Boy was a different type than the one that was actually lit off that they knew was going to work.
What was it? It was a...
So Little Boy was considered what they called a gun-type design, where one subcritical mass of uranium is then fired into another to create a supercritical mass. So to me, in my head, the simplest way to talk about it is it's shooting the gas truck in an action movie.
Yeah.
The bullet hits it, the spark ignites the gasoline, you get a big explosion. That's how I see it in a very simplistic way. Fat Man was an implosion type design where the conventional explosives compressed a subcritical plutonium core to a supercritical state. So that was the type they knew would work because that's what they had detonated during the Trinity test. The first one they're sending over is a different type that they have not technically tested. And the reason they did this is because they were like, we're sure it's going to work.
Which is a lot of confidence when you're talking about sending over the largest bomb that's ever been detonated in the world onto a foreign country to try to stop a war. If you don't test that and that thing ends up detonating 100 feet after you drop it out of the hatch and you have a nuclear explosion that high in the atmosphere over the top of Japan, what's in the Japanese mindset? Are you looking up and what'd you say before the episode? It's like you see a star exploding and you just wonder if that's what it is.
Yeah. I don't know what you would think about that. You'd never seen anything like it. So it's not really getting ahead of ourselves or anything. When they're constructing Little Boy on Tinian, they wait to install like the last piece until they're in the air. So, and the only time that the gun style device was ever used was this.
Yeah.
It was never recreated or anything like that. They used it because they had enough materials to make this, and it was so simplistic. It wasn't going to be as large or powerful, but that's what Fat Man's job was supposed to be. I don't even want. What is that guy? They take off. He's sitting over there, kind of in the bomb bay, and they're like, "So when do we put in the last piece?" He's like, "Honestly, I would say probably like right before we drop it."
We're going to be there in 15 minutes, so I'm thinking maybe you head down there to finish up at 14?
Yeah.
14 sounds good to me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe 14:30?
I don't want this thing hot for any longer than it possibly has to be.
No, it's such a scary premise, and to know that that's why they did it, because if they had put it in on Tinian and something happened on takeoff that shook this the wrong way or anything like that, there's no more Tinian. Tinian is completely wiped off the face of the earth. It's just back to ocean at that point in time.
Yeah.
Like it's going to take Tinian another 300 years to regenerate and grow back up out of the water.
Okay. So just to get a little more scientific on this. So with the Little Boy components that were actually on the Indianapolis, so they carried approximately half of the supply of enriched uranium for the bomb in special canisters. So approximately half of it, but still, again, necessary components.
Yeah.
It transported the gun type assembly in the large wooden crate. So that was basically the bomb assembled as they could, but then more assembly had to happen on Tinian. They also carried like the bomb casing and other parts for it. The target piece was broken up into 3 pieces, each being capable of being the target piece, put onto separate like B-29s or something, and then flown in separate routes to Tinian.
Last thing you want to do is get everything concentrated in one thing and then that thing getting blown up.
I mean, all your eggs are pretty much put into the basket of the Indianapolis getting there because it's carrying more than half of the necessary stuff. But you're also saying we're not going to lose everything if this goes down. And like you said, the first instructions, if that thing went down, were to get the case out of there, which means you had to break the welds. Like, can you imagine, like, the ship's going down? You're like, fuck.
You got a guy up there with a peanut grinder just at the ready, waiting to plug it in. And
he just has to sit there the entire time.
Yeah.
So July 16th, the Indianapolis departs Hunters Point, again, within hours of the successful Trinity test. Normally, families would come out to watch them go under the Golden Gate Bridge and everything like that. Because this thing was secretive, and as soon as they got the word, the ship was completely out of sight before any of the families could even gather to it.
McVeigh has no idea what the ship or what's in the ship that he's carrying.
Nope. He's just like, here's the deal. You are going to go straight to Pearl Harbor, and from Pearl Harbor, you're going to just refuel there. No one's getting off or anything like that. And then you are going down to Tinian. Quick as you can.
Boys had quite a good time with this. They see this big crate getting loaded up on, and they start taking bets. What do we think this is? What's this top secret mission? Are we taking a Cadillac to MacArthur? Are we taking scented toilet paper to MacArthur? Basically, anything that they could do to take a dig at MacArthur. It seemed maybe MacArthur was on Tinian at this point in time.
there was, I think that one of the non-MacArthur ones was, it was whiskey to celebrate the end of the war, but that could have been MacArthur's whiskey.
Yep.
And
also,
he needed that much. So I'm sure there was a MacArthur spin to that. So this thing ends up setting the speed record because it arrives July 19th in Pearl Harbor in less than 75 hours.
This thing averaged 29 knots, 54 kilometers an hour, 33 miles an hour is how fast this thing is. And what, the record's still today for this class of ship?
Mm-hmm. But I mean, they don't use that class of ship anymore, but I want to say maybe a ship of that size or dimension, but it still holds the record for quickest run to Pearl Harbor.
And at any point in time in the war, that's faster. That's how important this shipment was. Mm-hmm. It was more important than anything else that had crossed.
They saw, and I don't know if the date was already set when they were going to drop it, because again, it was based upon when does the ship get there. Mm-hmm. We schedule it getting here at this point, but we don't really know how long it's going to take to assemble, when we get the thumbs up that the assembly is complete, and then when whoever is there giving the final order to say this date works best because the weather permits or something like that.
It probably had a soft launch date and then a hard date.
Yeah, and I mean, but the stuff had to be there and ready because they saw how many casualties were happening on even these smaller non-Japanese homeland islands, and there was a huge rush. Like, how do you when something, if you're planning on using it anyway, it goes off on the 20th, but you had it available on the 15th and you lose 50,000 guys.
Yeah.
Like, that's 50,000 guys you don't have to lose. So there was a lot of that thinking in play.
The whole point to dropping the atomic bomb is to try to lessen the loss of life. So every day that sits in Tinian.
Yeah. Well, when you actually dig into it, it makes sense. But when you just say that we use the nuke to save people, it's just kind of like,
It's harder to explain.
Yeah. So they fuel up and haul ass for Tinian completely by themselves. This is very, very strange, very abnormal to occur.
In a way, I bounce back and forth because it makes sense as far as this being a top secret mission that you want this thing to be moving as fast as possible. So if you're carrying support ships or anything like that, it could potentially slow you down.
I don't know how fast destroyers were. I would imagine destroyers were pretty fast, but I don't know for sure. Yeah, maybe it was just there were no ships able to keep up at that consistent speed. The combination also saying, hey, what's easier to spot, one ship or three ships or whatnot? Yeah.
The flip side to that coin is if you are spotted.
But at the same time, is there a lot that can catch you at that point? Submarine couldn't catch you.
Depending on if it's in front of you as you're coming up.
Yeah, but then it only gets one shot.
Yeah.
Like, if something's able to pursue you and constantly harass you and fire at you, I think that's the other thing too, is it's like one target, less of a radar detection and everything. And if anything did end up showing up, it had a better chance of speeding past it on its own.
Yeah, and then there's just the simplest answer of saying that the more people involved in a top secret mission,
there's that too.
The more chance.
Because we're having to organize those ships instead of just getting you fuel and getting you out of there. Yeah. By the 26th of July, it arrives in Tinian. The port ends up not being deep enough because, again, Tinian is this little island that they had taken just, a few months or maybe a year prior.
10 days steam. That's all it takes. From leaving San Francisco on July 16th to getting there on the 26th.
And that's an indirect route.
Yep.
So they end up bringing a barge out to the ship. They unload the crate that's in the captain's quarters, and then they pull off this giant wooden crate that is then placed in the barge and taken into Tinian, never to be seen again. The ship doesn't dock. Nobody gets off or anything like that. And the key mission has now essentially been accomplished by the Indianapolis.
Yeah, they did their part. But these ships in these days during wartime, you can't have all your eggs in one basket. They would leave.
Oh, there were 2 Manhattan Project reps on the ship during this entire time.
They were the ones that had to do it, and supposedly one of them was there to test to see the radiation emitted from the
coming out of McVeigh's room. So it was Major Robert Furman and then Dr. James Nolan. And then I think Nolan was seasick like the entire time, which basically just gave him an excuse to hang out in McVeigh's quarters with a Geiger counter or whatever it is.
Conveniently seasick, probably.
But can you imagine, like, McVeigh comes in every day and he sees him doing the, and he's like, so is that? And he's like, no, like, well, hold on. You already have kids? Yeah. You're good.
Yeah, don't
You're
worry
good to
about
sleep
it.
in your quarters.
Just in case, maybe every time you come in here, we have a lead line admiral jacket,
Blanket.
captain's jacket.
Sleep with this lead line blanket. You'll be fine. Also, on the same day, that's when 3 pieces of the enriched uranium that had been split up that were put on the 3 C-47 cargo planes. They arrive on the 29th. So 3 days after the actual components from the ship are dropped off, that's when the 3 planes come in.
Okay. By that time, they have the Indy has already hit Guam.
They waited until they dropped them off to send the order to launch the planes.
I could see
That's
that.
why, because they wouldn't send it if they didn't have what they needed.
Yeah. It's moot. It's an unnecessary risk to
Like a
put that
cow's
in the
opinion.
air.
It's moo.
It's moot. Okay. The Indy has to continue on because at this point in time, this is a top secret mission. So not only do you have to basically continue playing the part of what it is, you have to have a plan B.
Oh, fun fact real quick. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're fine.
There was written on Little Boy, there was a message that said, "Greetings to the Emperor from the men of the Indianapolis."
Really?
Yeah. And they said a couple of the sailors, it was during those interviews when they were talking about never seeing more braids or brass than were standing there, like ready to receive the package in the barge and everything.
Everybody that's important that has any information on what that is has to be out there watching the pickup, right?
Not only just important to the actual thing itself, but imagine that you're like a guy in the Pacific or whatever, like a general or something like that. And they're like, so you get to know this. They're actually bringing this thing into Tinian. It's supposed to be this war-ending device. And you're just looking at your page or your assistant or whoever there, and you're like, you got to get me tickets to this. Get me on that island. Schedule a boat. Get me out there. I don't care what excuse you have to make. Pull some strings, but I want to be there when that thing arrives.
They all lied to MacArthur and told him that it was the toilet paper. He's like, God, my ass stinks. Mm-hmm. Bring my toilet paper on. I need to use it post-haste.
Watch him crank. Be like, no, why don't you open it, man? The fuck is this?
I can't wipe my ass with this. It's all steel.
All right, so they end up continuing to Guam, and I don't think we've even mentioned this. So it's not like the same group of sailors from the time that the Indianapolis has been sailing to now have been the same group. There's been many crews, many people serving on this, dependent on kind of the time frame. Even when it comes into Mare Island for those repairs after it got hit by that bomb, some of the crew, they're done with their tours. They bring on new crew that ends up making that mission run. There's even some crew that when they get to Guam, after dropping it off, are done with their tours, which to me sounds weird that you're ending your tour in Guam. Like,
brother, that date hits and you're off.
You don't care where you are.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes complete sense to me. Okay, yep. I'll wait it out here on Guam till the end of the war, and then I'll mark my way. Guam's nice.
Yeah. Guam's far enough away from Japan that I feel very comfortable being here.
Yes, Guam's got ice cream, man. Guam's got ice cream in a bakery. So some sailors at the end of the tours were actually relieved by others just coming on board the Indianapolis at this point.
That's the other thing. We were talking about their contracts ending. You have to get flown to Guam to be picked up to start yours.
Or you're there, you were on another ship, that ship got damaged, you're being reassigned.
Yeah.
By some way, you find your way. Either it's your first time or it's just a transfer, but you find your way. as your first journey on the Annapolis being the one that's about to go down.
Yeah, it's great foreshadowing that I'm glad you brought up.
Okay, so Guam, if we're looking kind of at a map and we see Australia, New Guinea right to the north of it, kind of on the east coast, Guam is a little bit out to further east. So in order to get to their next destination, which is Leyte, it's actually west. Because I think Leyte is in the Philippines. I feel horrible.
Yeah, I
at the top of
believe.
my head. But anyway, they're having to then go west through what were previously Japanese-held waters, can still have some, Japanese patrols and everything like that in there, but should be relatively more controlled and safer, according to Naval Command. So June 28th, that's when they leave Guam, heading for Leyte to the west.
McVeigh knows this. McVeigh says, do I need an escort? The commander that he's talking to says no.
Totally reasonable request. Hey, the secret mission, the necessity for me to not have an escort is now over. The stuff's not on my ship anymore. I am now another ship in active duty for war and everything, and I'm heading not away. I'm not going further east to head back to the States. I'm heading west into areas that, while may not be under full control of the Japanese Navy, still have a assumed presence.
Yeah.
I'm a capital ship. I was a fleet flagship. It is written in the rules that I should have an escort. I'm not supposed to be leaving without an escort.
I'm a 5-star man, damn it.
Yes.
You protect me. No need. Because this port of travel has already been clear. We know that there's no Japanese subs. Those guys that hang out below the water, we know they're
That's
not
Highway
there.
55, baby. You're just going to cruise into Leyte.
Yep. And the whole reason to go to Leyte is because this crew would receive their training for the impending Japanese invasion, because at this point in time, we're building up for the invasion force as a second measure, just in case the atomic bombs don't do their thing.
And I mean, in their defense, I mean, the last reported sinking that took place along that corridor, that was months ago, right? It was months prior.
Yeah, months, days, less than a week, 6 days. The information that this commander gave McVeigh is so fucked because 6 days prior, the Underhill, which was a destroyer, did we decide?
Yeah, that's what you said.
Had been sunk by a submarine in this area. That information was never passed on from the commander to McVeigh. The commander that made the decision to not send the escort should have had that information.
I want to say he did.
He might have. He just might have decided not to pass it
I
off.
think McVeigh also had a guy that he had trusted because he had, again, been in that area. He's a captain also as well in naval intelligence that he had trusted, that had given him solid information in the past. And that guy knew that there had been a sinking, but I don't know if he just didn't think that the odds were going to happen again, or it would cause more. But he didn't give him the information. That's very clear cut. The McVeigh did not have that information.
Well, there's a myriad of excuses that are given. There weren't ships that were slated for. Everybody else kind of had prior engagements, they said. They couldn't get an escort there in time to continue them on to Leyte. Fully probably understanding and knowing what the Indianapolis had just dropped off to Tinian, and we'll talk about the timing of things.
You're fine. You guys are fast as fuck.
Yeah. And you're just going over to do training.
Yeah. The fighting is way up to the north. You're fine. So, I mean, totally smooth sailing to Leyte, right?
Yeah, I mean, for a day or two. We come to midnight on July 30th, 12 a.m. We have the changing of the shift duty on the Indianapolis.
It's pitch fucking black outside.
Pitch black, moonless night.
No lights. You don't run any lights that are visible. That's why, not only for the purpose of armor and defensiveness, that's why you don't have any lights that are really going to outside windows. The only windows on this ship are essentially on the command deck. And at that point, it is pitch black. they maybe have the, a little light, undermount light, like on the compass or navigation and stuff like that, to where it's only visible for the guys steering the ship and the guys in the command center. But it was cloudy. I think some of the guys had said you couldn't even see your hand in front of you. It was that dark. And do you ever sometimes feel like do you know what, like, real darkness? It's like waking up in the middle of the night in your bedroom, just a little bit more light than that when it's almost pitch black.
Yeah. I mean, I do sensory deprivation tanks and they're pitch black.
Okay.
Like it's to take away that feeling of sight.
Yeah. I think it's just a very foreign concept to be like, you're in the middle of the ocean. And if there's no moon, there's no reflectiveness on the water. It's not like a TV show. It's not like a movie. It's just black and you can hear the water.
And it's got to be the most eerie feeling in the world.
Yeah.
And not to mention it's hot as shit.
And you're still without an escort. Even if you're on
alone.
watch and you're on shift, you're looking around and being like, man, we haven't had an escort since we left fucking Mare Island. Like, what is going on here?
There's 1,200 people that you're occupying this ship with, but a foot to each side of this ship, there's just nothing.
Yeah.
For thousands of miles. There's maybe a silver lining. I'm going to call it a silver lining because this is the point in the episode where we're going to start looking for these. It was so hot that a lot of the sailors that were going to go down and go to sleep as the shift changed, it was so hot below deck and there were so many people on the ship that they had actually taken to going out and sleeping on the deck. And for reasons that we'll talk about here in a blow up in a second.
Yeah.
It's probably great that they were up there.
Yeah.
On this ship, you're working 24/7. These shift changes are happening. I want to say they said they were working them in like 4-hour shifts maybe through the night.
Okay.
They did this thing called hot bunking. When you're heavy on a ship like that, a hot bunk is just you have 3 guys to 1 bunk, but since they're working in shifts,
everyone's trading out.
One guy's getting out, the next guy's getting into sleep, that guy goes into work, and they just keep continuously rotating. So your 8 hours or 4 hours or whatever is contingent on the other guy being up out of your bunk.
The other 2 guys being preoccupied.
Yeah. So there's always people basically in all parts of this ship when this is going on. As Chris said, it's pitch black. It's midnight. You're not hitting them, broad daylight, anything like that. This should technically be the safest time that you're traveling. If everything is dark and you can't be spotted.
It's the best time to travel. It's the worst time to be spotted.
Yes. Yeah. It's a very apt way to put it. A defense mechanism that they use on these ships it's not called zigzagging. It just literally is zigzagging. You travel in a zigzag fashion, so a submarine isn't able to lock on to you and be able to fire a torpedo. By the time that gets to you, you're going to be in another zag.
I wonder how often you're supposed to do that and kind of the range that these torpedoes had. Part of me thinks, like, if you're doing the zigzagging, is it more to dodge the torpedoes or to throw off any type of course that the submarine can predict to then try to get in position or to lead you into it? But regardless, he was told there was nothing in this area. The zigzagging is actually at the discretion of the captain based upon what his perceived threat level is, which is, again, then perceived off the information that he's given. And at about 10 minutes after midnight, some say 10, some say 12, some say 15, one of the guys that was on the ship is talking about how he checked his watch during the shift change and it was midnight. And then after everything happened and they went into the water, he was able to check it again and it stopped working. So he's judging certain things by that. But about 10 minutes after midnight on July 30th, they had already been spotted by a Japanese submarine. The name or the number was I-58.
Yep.
And they'd gotten into a position and had launched a spread of 6 torpedoes.
So this commander of this submarine, Commander Mochitsura Hashimoto, breaches the water. He pops out of the top, or he pops his periscope. He's looking around. Cloudy night, no light in sight. There's just a small little break in the clouds where the moonlight shines through and he picks up on the Indy.
A surface ship.
Yeah. They dive back down. As soon as they dive back down, Hashimoto orders the sub to fire 6 Type 95 torpedoes. And basically what this is you're firing 6 torpedoes in a spread to do anything like, say, if a ship was to be zigzagging,
yes,
it would be able to still be hit because of the 6 torpedoes.
Regardless of the sporadic nature of the zigzag, and if you don't know when they're, because it's not like, hey, we're going to turn here for 30 seconds, turn here for, because then that's predictable. Yeah. It's like, we're turning this way for 2 minutes, then we're going to turn this way for, 3 minutes. That way, if they were like, well, he's going that direction, we got to get in fire position, but then he changes directions again. 6 is going to just lead you out there to where if they start zigging away from you, the ones that you launch kind of behind them, or like that would normally be behind them on a straight line, can then catch up. Or
torpedo 3 is going to hit instead of torpedo 1.
Yeah, it's just increasing your odds.
Now, this feels like immaterial because we just spent all this time talking about McVeigh not zigzagging. McVeigh had said, we put our engines through enough strain, hauling ass to Tinian. Let's take it easy on the engines. Let's just go straight. We were told that this is safe waters.
A guy I've trusted has never led me astray, and naval intelligence says we're all good.
My superior told me this.
So this thing ends up getting hit with 2 torpedoes.
On its starboard side,
its starboard side. So one of them was toward the front of the boat.
First torpedo.
And that one pretty much sheared off a huge section of the front of the bow. Just opened it up like a jaw, opening up, and as the ship is continuing to go through the water, it's just forcing water into the ship. So it's flooding all these compartments. Very quickly after, another torpedo hits, pretty much centered, maybe a little bit behind center mass, and creates a huge explosion, rocks the ship and everything. It's pure pandemonium at this point. What was just previously completely pitch black outside, you were also aware that the moon shone a little bit. You can't spot a fucking periscope. You're looking out, it's not like they're being lazy and they're just like, hey, we're not watching. There are still lookouts. There are still people on assignment that are watching the water for this kind of stuff. But even with a little bit of moonlight, a little pole sticking out of the water isn't going to match the size of a gigantic ship going across the surface of it, causing a wake.
Indianapolis had surface radar. It did not have submarine radar.
And it had surface radar, so it could detect aircraft and stuff coming in.
Yep. So this first torpedo that ends up hitting, as Chris was talking about, hits towards the bow of the boat, which is where the sleeping quarters were. So everybody that was previously below deck in the sleeping quarters is now
in that particular set. They're spaced throughout the boat, but there are certain locations where they're, I think, more heavily condensed.
Second strikes near the fuel tanks and a powder magazine, creating a massive explosion. That explosion disables the comms and the power to the entire ship. It's going to be very important because, as Chris said, we have about 12 minutes before this thing is completely under the water. You need to start sending out an abandoned ship notice to everybody.
And that's not even where the thought process is at this point. When the front gets hit, the engines are still going because it's not like someone yells, turn off the stop. The ship gets hit. Who's ever on the bridge at that point? I don't think it's not the captain. They have to go wake him during this because, again, it's midnight. Your initial reaction as soon as you get hit is
fuck out of there.
Is to get the fuck out of there. It's not like, hey, slow the engine so they can get another shot at us. It's we need to crank it up and just keep going. So that's the impression that even if the guys in the engine room, I'm sure they felt some impact out of that first one, they're not going to be like, oh, hey, guys, cut it out. So even though those guys in the front that are probably reporting about all this flooding, you're like, hey, the water's coming in. The guys in the engine department don't know this yet. You get hit with that second one, it cuts out all the power and communications. Even if they wanted to tell the engines to stop, they couldn't tell them if they wanted to.
So you're just basically driving more water into the ship.
You're continuing to drive water. And as this thing gets hit, even the first time, guys kind of fall overboard, even from just the shock of the ship getting hit. When it gets hit the second time and there's that explosion, people get blown overboard and everything, or fall overboard or dive overboard because it's all hell is breaking loose, and the ship continues to go forward. As the ship begins to take on water and starts to list and everything like that, more people are coming off the ship. but the ship is continuing to travel forward. So it's not like these guys are also condensed all around the area where it's sunk itself. It's wherever it first got hit and then where it sinks.
I think they said it was
a mile.
That was I thought they said the debris field was 25, but maybe that was the oil slick.
The debris, the 25 miles is where they thought it sunk versus where it actually sunk.
Okay.
They said it was about a mile from where like the first couple guys fell off to where the ship actually sank.
Jeez. Yeah, and in this situation, your first thought is to shut the engines down. Your second thought is you need to send out an SOS. They had reported back to the radio room. The radio room had said, as they sent out the SOS, there was one antenna that had full power being sent to it as the message was being sent out. Doesn't sound important, but what's going on later will be extremely important.
Well, I mean, think of it this way. You're on this ship, most, if not all the people on this ship. You know who works where, you know who does what, because that's who you get information from. You know the guy that's in the radio room because he's the guy hearing everything. If you want to find out, hey man, where are we heading? How close are we? Like, when are we supposed to be there? He's going to have that information. Yeah. So guys knew who was on ship for the radio. And as this thing is sinking and as they're out in the water, they're looking at this guy being like, you got it off, right? Like, you got the signal off that we've been sunk. And he's like, I looked at the tack, the little gauge had a full meter on it. I sent the message. Yes, the message was sent.
So as we're going down, everybody should have gotten the SOS message to come save us. Mm-hmm. That's what's in everybody's minds as the ship is underneath the water.
Well, this thing ends up going down in about 12 minutes. The guy that said he looked at his watch, I want to say he looked at it. He saw it at 12:10. Explosions happened. And then once he got in the water, it had frozen or something like that. But the research that we did on this, a lot of it was very heavily like interviews with the guys that had survived this. So you're getting all these different perspectives of what they were feeling, what happened as the boat was sinking and where they were at. So as this thing starts to go down, the captain and his like command staff are coming out. Sailors are on the decks as the ship is listing and being like, hey, there's all the life jackets are like tacked up aboard the outside of like certain portions of the ship with like a strap. He's like, I'm cutting these down. I need to cut and you have commanding officers that are in charge of these ships being like, we don't have the order to abandon ship yet. Those are only to be taken down when we have the order to abandon ship. Same thing with like life rafts. Like there's this scramble of like the structure of command, but then like, hey dude, like what, do you see power on the ship? Yeah. Like you want someone to yell, like poke their head out a window and being like, hey, abandon ship. There's fire. There's guys screaming that have been injured. It's fucking pure pandemonium. And they can't communicate over the loudspeakers to abandon ship. So you have the commander coming down who's made the decision and is basically like, pass the fucking word, like start yelling out and everything. But it's again, contingent on who's hearing this. So then you have guys being like, well, fuck you, sir, respectively, and cutting down like life jackets and trying to get them on and passed out to people. Guys were saying that they could actually hear as it's going down, the bulkheads breaking and snapping and kind of feel like the impacts through the ship. The fuel that's been leaking out the entire stretch after that thing got hit has ignited and there's fire and shit, which I don't even know if you want to look at a silver lining and say, well, at least there's light, but it's also burning guys fucking alive. Yep. That are covered in this fuel. Yep.
The explosion that happened burned a lot of people that were in that area that were below deck. It even had ruptured up into the top. And there was one story, the guy's name escapes me. I should have written it down. I believe his last name was Lopez, that was sleeping with one of his buddies up on the deck, had brought a blanket, and his buddy was making fun of him for using a blanket because it was 100 plus degrees outside. And he said, I'm from New Mexico. Living down there, you're always worried about insects getting to you and mosquitoes eating you alive. So even though it was so hot, I had put the blanket over the top of me just for the comforts of home. When the explosion happened and he woke up, his buddy was covered in burns and he didn't have a blanket on him anymore, but he hadn't been burned. So just this one little creature comfort from home of wearing this blanket during this explosion had said that the fire had basically burned that instead of his skin, whereas there were so many people that were covered in just these charred burns.
And learning about this is when you just read about it, it's very succinct and everything, which is why listening to these guys talk provides such a more intense outlook on it, because hearing guys talk about, I didn't jump off the ship left me. These are guys that were like, I was, as it started to list, when it was listing to the side, it also started to list at the bow as well. So think of like, if it's going forward, it's diving to the side and down. And as it starts to go down that way, there is the suction that will pull people under once the ship eventually does go under. But there's also guys that are going, portions of the ship that are going down, that they're still standing there, that they just feel the ship leave their feet. There was one guy that says that for a while he was bouncing on the edge of one of the guns, like on the barrel.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he just felt it go underneath his feet and he just was floating. But yeah, that was one of the guys' quote. He's like, I didn't jump off the ship. He's like, the ship left me. One of the guys was taking a shower during it.
Oh, no.
And he got out of the shower and ran up there naked. And he's like, I guess I'm already going in the water. I don't need clothes or anything. But as they're, once they're floating there a couple days later, one of them was like, George, man, did you forget to turn off the shower?
And that's really what it has to be. It has to be gallows humor when you're going through this stuff and you're in this situation. The life vests that we're going to talk about a little bit later are called K-Pop life vests. They are great in certain instances, but not great in longer instances. But there was an order that they'd gotten, I believe that was in Guam, where, and this is another just stupid silver lining, there was a second order of life vests that had been loaded onto the ship. And when they were going through and checking everything that was on the ship, they're like, why did we get these? Like, I don't know, just stash them somewhere. Mm-hmm. We don't need to hang them up. It'll be okay. In the chaos that you're talking about, when they're trying to cut down these lifeboats and these life vests in order to be alive, anything that's loose and that's around, you're going to be able to put on. And they said that this extra shipment of life vests that they had on mm-hmm. board actually was kind of a benefit for them, because they didn't have to go pull them down and they didn't have an adequate amount of life vests for the people that were on the ship.
Yeah.
So even having a little bit extra, if you can grab 2 of them, it just means that your buoyancy is going to be better. But we're kind of dancing around something that is pretty intense, that took me to some pretty painful sounding places. As you're abandoning down into the water, if you've been burned or anything like that, a gaping open wound on your body, you're jumping into salt water.
I like just thinking of the concept of like you're burned down one of the sides of your body, and all it's, a cut's bad enough, like that's all exposed.
Yep.
And not only that, to add on to that, the oil that's been leaking out of this ship the entire time is very, very thick oil. It's naval vessel oil.
Viscous.
And when it gets on the water, it doesn't just like spread in a thin. They said in some areas where it was concentrated, it was a 2-inch thick, right, float of this oil. This stuff is so viscous. The only way that it can be like removed or made to be essentially like more liquidy is by heat. And not like heat of, 70-degree water or something like that. Actual like being used in the internal combustion process is heat. So these guys are jumping in and just being coated in this oil and are not able to get it off, and it's burning their fucking skin. And the ones that have burns and are getting oil all over them, we're going to jump forward for just a second to like the rescue efforts, or when people were originally coming down and seeing these guys, they're covered. They're completely black.
Please tell me you're going to talk about the guy that was washing guys on deck.
We will once we get to that point.
That was such a funny line that he has when they're cleaning him up.
But
well, and think about it this way. If you've ever had oil in your eye, which thank God I've never had oil in my eye, the first thing you mud on your face. Mm-hmm. First thing you do with mud on your face is you try to claw the mud away from your eyes so you can open it up and see what's going on. Now, the hand that you're pawing at your eye with is covered in salt water to try to pull away this thick, goopy, viscous oil.
Or oil, and you don't realize it's on your hands because you come up out of the water after you've gone down. You come up in a fucking float of this stuff, and you go to just wipe your face naturally, and you're just smashing fucking more oil into your eyes.
Yep.
And it's already fucking pitch black, and yeah, there's some fire and everything, but just think of just even the sound of the ship going down. You know, there's screaming going on of guys in pain, that guys that are incapable of swimming. Fuck, we haven't even talked about that yet. Is that a lot of these guys didn't know how to swim.
Okay, so that's what I was saying when I was saying that I was glad that you pointed out that there were guys that were new and fresh-faced that were showing up on the ship, because there were guys that were in the Navy that the first time they ever saw a large body of water is when they reported in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
There were guys that couldn't swim, as you just said, and they're in the Navy.
And the Navy didn't train them to swim.
Yeah, what do we do? Not only that, but like, if you're going to train them, maybe take them to the ocean. If that's where they're going to be, maybe have basic or boot camp near an ocean.
Do you think that is because, you know, you're trying to get a lot of guys, you're getting every guy you can to try to serve. If you teach them to swim, you're putting the message out there that, hey, you might need to know how to do this. And if that could deter them from possibly joining the Navy, or if it was just something to where it was like, we're just trying to rush guys through, and if we try to teach them to swim and find out some of these guys can't swim, we're losing out on people that we could otherwise just kind of be like, oh, no, it's not important, and just like get onto the boats.
We're cutting out 30% of our pool. It's a crazy thought to have, and just to think about hitting the water. The other crazy thought is you're jumping off of this ship, probably sliding 10, 15 feet down into the water after you hit this gloop at the top and you're going down. You've been down deep enough to where you're looking up at the surface of the water, and just those last few fractions of a second, you just have to breathe in and you take in a little bit of water. Now imagine that you're coming up through this viscous goop, and the last thing that you suck into your lungs and your stomach is this oil. It immediately makes you start throwing up.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem with throwing up in a survival situation like this is you have zero fresh water, and your body is just being dehydrated from the inside and the out.
That's what I'm saying, man. It's nightmare scenario on top of nightmare scenario on top of nightmare scenario.
And we're not even done with the nightmare scenarios.
Nope. This is actually the beginning of of it. So the ship goes down in about 10 to 12 minutes. 880 are able to actually make it off out of the 11 to 1200 or something. They say about 300 plus went down with the ship.
And these numbers are all kind of up in the air because we don't know exactly how many people are still on board. Spoiler alert, there's going to be some bodies that go missing in this episode, so we don't know the exact count of casualties.
Trying to figure this out about how many guys went into the water when you're spread out that far and guys start going missing before. There's no head count. It's just once the rescuing happens, and it's going off of like, how many do you think you saw in this group? I don't know, 20?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the number. 300 plus end up not making it out, 880 in the water. And again, they're spread out, covered in oil. It's still pitch black outside. They're also like, I don't know what that fear would feel like. Also, the fact like, okay, that obviously means that there's enemy around us. So now we have to worry about that.
Well, unfortunately, we never get to see an interview with McVeigh, but there were reports from McVeigh that he was, as a captain is, always the last man off the ship.
Mm-hmm.
McVeigh bobbing around in the water is looking around in this pitch black nightmare. And for a fair amount of the night, McVeigh believes that he might be the only one that survives. So you have to think, if you jump off the ship by yourself, if you're towards the back or you're towards the front and you jump off and you don't see anybody, you don't hear anybody, because again, you have the waves that are hitting you and jostling.
There's definitely
you around.
Screams and there's people yelling and stuff like that, but there's still a lot going on.
Yeah, you may be far enough away to think, am I the only guy that survived this?
Or just the shock.
Uh-huh.
You're hearing people around you, but you're in such shock about what just happened.
Yeah, how are you supposed to try to orient yourself in pitch black?
Yeah.
You're just hearing towards the screams and you're trying to swim and catch another guy in the ocean as you're passing?
Yeah. So, I mean, during the night, again, this thing's now underwater, it goes down. These guys are trying to, in whatever disoriented way they can, first of all, try to see what they're doing if they're all covered in oil. They're trying to call out to people to see if anybody else is near so they can kind of band together. They're looking for things that can actually be floated on for people that maybe didn't grab a vest or something like that. They're doing this in the dark, and they're doing this in small groups, just trying to kind of get close to one another. But again, they're completely spread out. So you might have a group of 5 here, you might have a group of 10 here. When this actual ship stopped and sank, at one point it went kind of like Titanic style, went the back of the ship went up and almost vertical, and you still had guys jumping off the ship at that point as well. And so the majority, the larger groups, were going to be more centered around where the ship had slowed down and where they were closer when it went down. But again, they're just sporadically spread over this wide area and in the dark, just waiting for sunrise to be able to try to even orient themselves about what's going on.
Which is just another fear that's coming up because you're sitting out in the baking sun in the South Pacific. They did kind of form some groups, just as you were talking about. The main group, as they'd slowed down and most people abandoned, were known as the swimmer group. They had a couple of lifeboats. I kind of understand the whole netting idea, but I'm not really understanding why they would have so much netting. But they did have these swim nets that had cork that were attached to them. Mm-hmm. So the cork would float and you would be able to cling onto the net to hold yourself. Maybe this was actually something like a lifeboat that they had just in case they go into the water to be able to spread and keep people above.
We'll talk about it during another episode. But I want to say they were the kinds of nets that they would throw over when like a ship went down and they were having rescue efforts to pull guys out of the water.
Okay.
So if part of the net has cork and floating and everything like that, you can get the net down. That part will float out to allow them to grab onto it to pull themselves closer to the ship before they start climbing up.
That makes way more sense.
So yeah, so they would have parts of net that would have at intervals this cork. So again, it's not going to be like floating on a mattress or anything like that, but it's maybe to where you could be standing on it. It can be keeping a large group of people.
Free buoyancy.
Yeah, exactly.
And in this group, you have somebody who steps forward who I'm sure at this point in time, this guy's mind was just utterly blown being what he was. But he was Lieutenant Commander Lewis Haynes. Lewis Haynes was the ship's chief medical officer. Imagine being the chief medical officer and needing to tend to all these people and then being put in like the worst situation that you could ever think of.
Yeah, without supplies.
The only thing that your mind goes to is just doing exactly what you need to do, what your job is. Just because the ship sank doesn't mean that your mission's over. Being the medical officer, you have to tend to the men around you.
You're never going to be busier than you are right now. And this is a scenario where, because it went down so quickly, there's no fleet or other ships around it to mount a rescue effort. That's what was kind of contingent on a lot of these rescue efforts when it came to how prepared the ships were to support people being rescued and for how long they had to survive.
Yeah.
They had some stores, they had some spam, they had stuff like, stuff that had floated off the ship and everything that had made it out. The floated people were clinging to that, opening stuff, hoping that it was rations or fresh water. All that stuff was in extremely short supply, but in their heads, they're thinking, oh, the signal got sent off. I mean, we're not out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. There's bases that are around us. There's other ships that might be, coming through here that got these signals. We should be okay if we can just last for a day or two. We're totally going to be rescued. I mean, I've heard of other ships going down and like talk to the guys. They were rescued in a couple days.
Well, we were 2 days away from Leyte. If we don't show up in Leyte on time, even if they didn't get the SOS, they're definitely going to send somebody out to look for us if we don't show up on time, right?
USS Indianapolis. Yeah. Of course they're going to come out. I mean, this is the Navy. Stuff runs like clockwork. If they don't see us there when we're supposed to be there, they know exactly the route that we were taking. They're going to send out a rescue party.
Yeah, they have to. There was another man in this group that stepped forward. He was a Marine. I believe he was a private, 18-year-old Edgar Harrell. And it's so important in these structures of the military that you have to no matter what's going on, you have to do your job. Just like we were talking about with Haynes, immediately when they hit the water, the sun rises, Haynes is going around and he's checking on these people because that's his job. Harold, being a Marine, understands that if the guidance is given, it's something that you've been trained to follow the guidance, and it's almost a little bit of a comfort. Like it can snap you back into doing your job as opposed to looking around at this utter chaos that you're in. It lessens the chaos when there's somebody that's commanding orders.
So people are just looking for answers.
Yeah.
It's so chaotic. I'm in the fucking Navy for the last however long. I've been told what to do. Like, that's what I'm looking for now. I don't want to
tell me what to do.
My brain isn't fucking working, and this is what you guys are supposed to have trained me for, is to just be able to operate through these times.
Yeah. Captain McVeigh, like we were talking about, last guy off the ship, believes that he's the only survivor. Somehow, luckily, he happens upon this raft. And in this raft, he has some rations that they found. There's some else floating that he's gathered around. As morning comes, he starts to gather some more of these solo swimmers that were around, and he does what a captain does. He starts commanding their survival. Think about what kind of a morale boost that would be if you're out there floating in the nothingness and the guy that happens upon you is the captain.
Yeah.
There has to be a comforting feeling to know that not only does he have a raft, which is awesome, he might have some rations, which is even better.
And I mean, these rafts aren't like huge rafts. They can't hold like a ton of guys. So you have people that are hanging on the sides of it. You have some people that are in. You have people going in shifts. You have people that are kind of floating out in their life jackets, and the 5-hour shift comes up. You get to get in the raft for a little bit just to try to get out of the water. Again, fast forwarding a little bit to when, eventually something does happen positive for these guys. They've been in the water, some of them, for what's going to be 5 days. You know what happens to your fucking skin after you're in the hot tub or a bath or even the shower?
For an hour.
5 days of waterlogging your skin, and it's to where the skin can almost be, I don't even want it, but like pulled off. Like you're...
highly uncomfortable to think about trying to grab these guys underneath the armpits and lift them out of the water and just feeling that skin shift with your hands. It's and
hear them scream.
Yeah, real creepy feeling. This first night in the water is spent just in chaos, as we were talking about. By morning, the swimmers group, under the leadership of Harold, has kind of figured out a better system. They begin to try and organize the crew that were suffering from burns, dehydration, and hunger because who knows when the last drink was that you took on the ship. Like, you don't think about that. When was the last time you ate on the ship? It's not that big of a deal because you're supposed to be on the ship still.
I think they said like the first 8 hours, the first night or the first day, they lost quite a few guys that had been previously injured because, I mean, surviving in this situation when you're not injured is a tall order.
Yeah.
Putting yourself to where you can't use one of your legs, you can't use one of your arms. You're separated. You're a solo swimmer out there by yourself. There's no one to support you. There's nothing to float on. A lot of these guys just simply succumb to their wounds within that first 8 hours to a day.
Well, if there's 6 guys in the radio room and there were 6 guys that ended up making it into the water and they saw that antenna being electrified for the SOS, those guys that are in those groups are saying, hey, we got the SOS off. We're going to be safe. There's this generally held belief that they were going to be rescued fairly soon because they got off the distress signal. As the sun starts taking the toll on the bodies, they just really start drying out. And you're in a situation where you're starting to get thirsty and you have to get a drink, and every little bit of water that's around you, you cannot drink. Because if you're taking in salt water, your body's not going to be able to process it, not to mention you're drying yourself out from the inside because the salt's staying inside your body. You're basically being pickled from within almost.
Yeah, so it's general knowledge. You don't drink seawater and everything. But when you're out there, you're thirsty, it doesn't take much, first and foremost. There probably isn't as much of you've been told in the Navy not to do it, but at the same time, this isn't like today where like the information can get bombarded at you, or you've seen movies where everybody that drinks seawater ends up dying.
They weren't teaching you how to swim. I don't think they had a real heavy course on not drinking seawater.
If the guys are knowledgeable enough in your group, they're like, nobody drink this stuff. you get another guy that comes up and spits it out and been like I drink a bunch.
If you've never seen an ocean before, you've never seen salt water.
They're
You don't have a
it's just
comprehension.
super salty, but I mean, my mammy's chicken is like really salty and I eat that. But the human kidneys can only process so much. And when you're drinking that much salt water, basically you're using the liquid that's already in your body to then help your kidneys flush more of the salt out of your system and urinate more. So like you said, yeah, you're pickling yourself. And not only does that from a standpoint of what does it do to your body, it's what it starts doing to your mind. Because as your body starts to kind of break down and not work as efficiently, you start to get delirious. Things start to sound like a better idea, like, hey, I think I see something over there. I think I see some land, or I think I see there's some more life jackets over there. There's another raft over there. Do you guys see it? And they said there are so many accounts of guys looking at their shipmates and they just see this look in their eyes. And it's like, hey, you see that over there, see that island? They're like, I don't see anything, man. He's like, trust me, it's over there. I'll swim there. I'll be able to get help. And then I'll make sure everyone gets rescued. And they would swim out and they would get 20 or 30 feet and go under.
So I'm going to jump ahead a second before we come back because this story leads in perfectly. I believe it was Edgar Harrell that was telling this story. It was on like day 3, I believe. He looked out after the sun had rose and there was a line of sailors that were just basically treading water. And I was like, that's weird. Let me go out and see these guys. He goes out, he talks to the guy in line. He goes, hey, what are you doing? And he goes, oh, we're in line. He goes, you're in line for what? He goes, there's a bunkhouse up there that guys are sleeping in shifts. You can go in, there's a cot and everything that's set up. It's just right over there. Harold said he looked in the direction that he pointed, and for a split second, he saw that same mirage that this guy had talked him into being there. So even if your mind isn't into that full, I'm going nuts zone, it's so on the brink of it that you can almost be talked into seeing something that's not there.
It breaks down your mental processing. So basically, the water that we need inside our cells for our blood, that then has to be shifted in order to process, like in our brain, the blood cells in our brain to do that. That has to be shifted to doing other things to try to keep the body surviving. So you're essentially just taking processing power out of your brain to where even simple stuff is easy to fool you.
All well, it's 100 degrees. I'm sure even hotter at the surface of the water. So you're fighting that from the inside while the sun is just pushing you further and further into hyperthermia as your body heats up. And then at night, when the water temperature drops below your skin temperature, it's slowly starting to bring you down. So you're just on this roller coaster of heating and cooling through these 24-hour periods. It's so incredible that we haven't even gotten to what I would say may be the worst part of this.
Yeah, so if we haven't introduced enough horrible situations or, enough to this horrible scenario, now we added another one.
Yep. By nightfall of that first full 24 hours that they're in there becomes a more dangerous threat outside the water because there's a very dangerous threat inside the water. I heard this once, and I'm going to run with it because I think that it's fun to say. Back in the 40s, the shark populations in the ocean were much higher than they are today.
Yeah.
Through fishing and different efforts to try to eliminate these creatures of the deep that we don't like. Shark fin soup becomes something that's a tasty morsel on some menus.
I don't know if it's as a direct result of this to a degree. Maybe popularity of it in the United States went up a bit.
Yeah, there's a lot less sharks in the water now than there were back then. And when these sharks start coming up, there's stories from these guys where they say that the sharks were so present in that area, you could feel stepping off the back of one to stepping onto another one. That was how deep these sharks were swarming. And what they were
like
white tip?
Like white tip or something like that. There were some tiger sharks in there as well.
Rather solitary creatures that come together in packs to hunt if there's enough meat.
So there's already bodies that were put in the water.
Yeah.
People are wounded. There's blood in the water. It's not going to take long for that to happen. It's warmer waters. The waters are also pretty clear. So even though they can't see, it's super deep. They can't see down at the bottom, but there's what they said, 20 to 30 feet of visibility down.
Yeah.
And you would just look down and there would just be a school of sharks swimming underneath you. Now, I don't know. I can't decide which one is worse, to look down and be able to see it so you could tell yourself, well, at least I can see something coming, or to have to sit there and watch and or to have it not be visible and not be able to see what's under there and just feel stuff. I don't know which one is worse.
Well, and you're almost blinding yourself looking down into the water.
And at
as
night.
you're catching a sun reflection. At night you can't see.
It's both of them. You can see them during the day, and at night you can't see them, but because they were there during the day, they're still down there.
And it's just those polar opposites of fear that's going on. The swimmers did kind of come up with a little bit better system. They knew that being in bulk, it was much easier than instead of being alone and getting picked off. They created these concentric rings, basically pushing sadly, the more injured people towards the outsides of the rings because they were less of a chance to be surviving. But they actually tied their K-Pock jackets together. So even if you weren't grabbing a hold, you were still able to move in a circle to be tied and lashed to one another. It worked, but it works to fend off the sharks. It doesn't work, as we'll see as the days tick on, because you have those people that start going a little bit nuts. Mm-hmm. And it seems like there's quite a few of these sailors. I'm sure that it might have been standard issue to just have a knife on you at all times.
But it's at nighttime. You're in your...
Yeah, later on as things start getting aggressive, there's some knives that come out of nowhere.
I think there's some makeshift shit.
I guess if you're flying driftwood or anything like that. So as we go deeper and deeper into this, you have them drinking the water. Nightfall, there's more sharks coming. You're trying to stave off the crazies of what's going on. By the morning of August 1st is when these hallucinations start to fracture these groups. There's numbers of living that are dwindling because they're being picked off by sharks, because they're dying of their injuries. There's just so much going on.
So there's already bodies that are getting dragged off and everything like that. So there would be this constant, clearing of the dead, I guess you could say. But then at the same time, as guys are going out due to the hallucinations or due to the saltwater poisoning, the sharks are instantly just picking off those guys. Audibly, you're sitting there just constantly hearing, even if groups aren't super close to everything, you're just constantly hearing screaming of people that are getting attacked, people that are getting dragged through the water, water's turning red. There was one instance that they said there were a bunch of guys on one of those net things, and there were a bunch of them that were, I don't know if they had their legs through the holes or anything to keep them floating or anything, but they said a school, one started it, a shark came up and started attacking, and then it just created a fucking frenzy.
There's a swarm of sharks.
And then all the guys, there were 20 of them that were within this net, were all torn apart.
Yeah, there were stories of survivors talking to what they believed were other survivors, and they would go over and push them, and they would actually push them over into the water because everything below the water line had been...
It was just the life jacket that was keeping the body afloat.
The torso.
It's it's like when Quint off of Jaws is telling the story about the Indianapolis and everything. And I don't even know. That's so many different things that will just mentally break you down.
Well,
and you just have to be terrified the whole time.
Well, there's also a little measure of comfort, because again, we're going to keep pointing out these very thin silver linings. Lieutenant Thomas M. Conway was with the swimmers group. He was the chaplain on the Indy. He busied himself quite a bit with floating around and swimming around to try to administer as many last rites to the dying crew. I don't know if this is more for the survivors seeing it or if it's a little bit of peace at the end, but I think if you're in a dying scenario, you're probably not really lucid to what's going on. So I don't know what comfort you get from the last rites, but I think probably for the survivors to see that your body is being tended to towards the end the way that
before
you would
the
hope.
Sharks get it.
Yeah.
Because they're not keeping them around them. Like, I was thinking about that too, just from like a human standpoint, doing what it takes to survive, all that kind of stuff. You'd kind of put the question out, like, how many of these guys look back on this and saw the things they had to do to survive, and, you know, how do you think they feel about that? I mean, if your buddy next to you ends up getting attacked and he's, you know, begging you and everything like that, he's getting dragged under, he's grabbing onto you, and then he just dies. Surviving, like, you're sitting there, you have to try to shove that body and get it as far away from you as possible, and try to hope that the guy that was standing next to you is like going to appease whatever it is that's trying to kill you as well. And that was normal for a lot of those guys, is to have to just kind of be in that scenario and do stuff like that.
Yeah, and what does that do for your desire to survive?
When you see people keep getting picked off and dwindling, and is it, well, it's, at least it's not me, or is it, I'm next, my time's borrowed?
Yeah, there's so many thoughts that are running through a head that's just not thinking straight. The morale in McVeigh's group is starting to dwindle at this point, because the few rations that they had just weren't going to be able to sustain them. And not to mention, July 30th, this happens. August 1st, you're kind of getting towards that window of like, hey, where's the rescue?
Well, you're asking that the entire time.
Yeah, but you know, like, worst case scenario, the distress signal goes out. It might take them a couple days to get there.
Yeah, we were still a couple days out from, but where's, like, usually there's a plane, right? I've heard people talk about planes and
no shit, you're right. The whole entire time, I believe they said that over the course that they were out there, they had spotted about a dozen planes.
But flying so high, trying to look down and see these tiny darkened faces. Because again, it'd be different if they were all of them in one big group, churning up some water and everything. But flying at the height that these planes do, they're not looking. They're looking for like wakes of ships and fleets and stuff like that. They're not looking for individual little groups of sailors. Not only that, are they not looking for it? Even if they were, we're going to talk about it later. It still takes so much luck and the right, you know, the exact conditions to be able to even spot these guys. You would have to be going out there specifically looking for them along the exact same line, flying very low to try to find them. And these aren't the planes that are doing it. These are just planes that are doing scouting for completely unrelated purposes.
They're going to or from somewhere. They're not. Their eyes aren't transfixed on the ground. The crew begins to turn on each other in some pretty bad ways. There were times when the delusions would kick in and they would look over to one of the survivors next to them and they'd see a Japanese fighter. And they would start screaming and saying, we've been infiltrated.
Like a soldier.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Japanese soldiers are here. Here's one of them. We need to kill him. And these guys were pulling out their knives and stabbing each other in the water, which, if the sharks already weren't in a fresh frenzy, or maybe there wasn't a whole lot of blood in the water at that point in time, just creates an even more massive problem.
Yeah.
Not to mention you have
it's not like a mass case of this, but even isolated incidents of people doing this can,
Well, if it happens in a group of 8 people that are swimming together, and then all 8 people disperse, then you're out alone in the area that a shark can just come pick one guy off.
Yeah.
Like, the dispersal factor, and that's why the rings were so great. But when the guy next to you thinks that you're a Japanese soldier and he starts trying to stab at you and you're tied to him, that's when things really start to slosh around and become chaotic. And you have instances where, as somebody is passing away and dying, you're sad for the loss of your survivor that is now no longer with you. But you also then think to yourself, well, I have to survive. So you're over there trying to unclip his life jacket. So you have 2 life jackets. And after a couple days in the water, we were talking about the pruniness of your fingers. You're potentially tearing up your fingers trying to get these things apart so you have something else to save you. Just everything lays in these factors so hard. And we're not trying to drive some of this home. We could go deeper into some of the bad stuff that's happened to these guys, but it's just, what's the point after a while?
This is what these people have been comfortable discussing or been able to discuss.
And that's
I'm sure the darker shit, you know, I'm not at all like the people that survived this. They had to do what it took to survive. I can't even imagine what they went through. And so if these are their, shipmates and everything like that. So I'm sure they feel much worse about even slight things they had to do that increase their chances of survival, but diminish somebody else's.
These dudes having to live with whatever they did to survive is enough for me to not have to cast any judgment.
What they had to do to survive based on what was happening. Yep. It's just, that's the thing, is like, I don't know how some of these guys psychologically can even function.
And there was a point during, I think, one of the documentaries that we both watched where this guy said, I didn't talk about this with my family until like 1972.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't have therapists to go home to. I would come home and one of my kids would ask me how the war was, and I would say that it's fine. And then somebody found out that I was on the Indianapolis when it sank, and they said, what was that like? And I said, I don't know. The ship just went down and we got rescued. Mm-hmm. Like, that was the level that it took some of these guys decades to be able to open up and talk about. And we're in a race against time because this is a finite amount of people that we'll talk about. This story has to get out because we have to get it recorded. Mm-hmm. It's such a harrowing story, but at the same time, at a certain point, it's something that just needs to be talked about because of how historic it was.
It becomes a story of failure, but not on the part of any of the people that were on the Indianapolis.
Yeah. And for any of the guys that decided to take a breath and bob down into the water and never come up, can't blame them.
No.
Cannot blame them at all. They lived through way more than I could have handled before that happened. August 1st is really pretty rough. This is a point to where everybody is kind of wondering if there will ever be a rescue that happened. Into August 2nd starts like the rest. As we were talking about, there's these previous planes that have flown over they hadn't been able to get a hold of. They had gotten a hold of a flare gun, and McVeigh had fired off a flare to try to signal a plane and got no response in return. The only drinkable water that they had since the sinking to August 2nd is just intermittent rainstorms. And if you're out there floating around with your life vest in the water and you have no way to collect rainwater, it's not like you can hold your oil-soaked hands up and collect rainwater to drink. You can try.
You're doing it.
But the only way that you're getting water into your system is just literally opening your mouth and sticking your head back and just praying that these drops land in your mouth.
And who knows how bad those storms are. Even little storms out there throwing you back and forth, trying to separate your groups.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's you trying to get water. You're talking about the way that the waves are moving in harsher waters.
And how often you have your mouth up and a wave comes in, water comes in, and salt water gets in your mouth.
Yeah. And you're not going to get enough rainwater to wash that out. At this point in time, those Cape Hawk life vests that we were talking about that were worn by survivors had an estimated floating lifespan between 48 and 72 hours. Now, after the 72 hours is up and it's completely waterlogged, it tends to turn into a bit of a bowling ball. I guess cannonballs also works too, around your neck. So this thing that you've been depending on to survive out there in the water is now starting to weight you down further into the water. They said that there were guys that, as the dead would pass on and they would take life vests, would hold them above their heads not only to block the sun, but to try to keep them dry and dry them out enough to where they could swap the life vests in the water, which I'm sure is probably a task by day 4.
Trying to hold up one that's a little waterlogged just in the hopes that you can try to wring it or it'll dry out enough to where when that one gets waterlogged, you can keep just trying to buy yourself time.
Yeah.
And dodge fucking shark attacks.
Yeah. You're fighting every single front. It's an impossible task. On the 3rd, 11 a.m., this is where the sun starts to rise, not literally, but figuratively. A PV-1 Ventura was testing a new antenna. I believe that they said it was a Morse code antenna, flying lower than normal. It was piloted by a man named Lieutenant Wilbur Chuck Gwynn. He had moved to the back of the plane to try to adjust the antenna. I believe he said that it had broken.
It was like a cable antenna that actually towed out behind the plane and just kind of floated in the air.
Okay.
And I don't know if it was supposed to be something that would like amplify the signal or be able to like send it a further distance. But he went down to try to do that. And as he's down there fiddling with the wire, he's looking down into the water. And was the way he described it, the bumps on a cucumber?
That was when he gets back up at the front. So the first thing that he spots is the oil slick in the water.
That's right. And he comes up and he's like, the only reason there's usually an oil slick is like a damaged ship, but he's thinking in his head,
He was thinking sub.
he's thinking Japanese submarine or something like that. So he gets up there and he tells, hey, get on the guns, get the bombs ready.
Depth charges are ready to drop. I
Yep.
just saw an oil slick. For some reason, when a submarine drops, it leaves an oil slick. Don't know why that would be.
Maybe they're just leaky or something like that.
Potentially, yeah. Or they're closing everything up and there's a little residual. Climbs back up into the pilot's seat. Let's get this going. We're going to get ourselves a sub. We're so close to being to war. This is going to happen. As he looks down into this slick, he starts saying, yeah, what'd you say his description was?
The bumps on a cucumber.
Just the little tiny heads that are sticking above water. One of the guys in the documentary he said it was like spotting a 4x8 speck on a table.
Yeah.
It's just so tiny.
And the oil is kind of leading in that direction, but you have to imagine these parties are also trying to get away from the oil because it's covering them. So at this point, too, there has been, well, we're going to get to that in a second as far as the distress call goes. There's been no knowledge disseminated about a ship going down in this area. For all intents and purposes, he thinks it could have been a Japanese submarine that went down and there's people in the water. Another ship, a Japanese ship went down or something like that, and there's people in the water. He just knows there's people in the water.
And again, that's kind of not really a necessary thing at this point, because even though we are at war, there's always a duty to rescue a ship that's sunk. So even if they are Japanese, which for a while there's some questions as they're rescuing them because they're so covered in oil that they didn't even know who they were. They were pulling people on board that were so exhausted when they asked them where they were from, they were passing out before they could even give them information. But you have to try to save these people. They decided, instead of dropping depth charges, thank God, to drop a life raft and then some homing beacons to the stranded crew. And again, the stranded crew is just the area that they see. There's a mile's worth of people that are spread out, so you're just dropping it into one area. At the same time, dropping the homing beacon means that they're going to be able to be found again. He reported his findings back to his base at Peleliu. Glad that we saved Peleliu.
Yeah.
All surface and air units were dispatched for rescue operations. That's a massive issue because anything that's on the surface is going to be a ship, and it's just going to take time to get there.
Yeah, anything that's, I think they said the closest ones that were dispatched to go investigate and try to pull survivors were like 12 hours away.
That's a pretty heavy steam, and these guys, they don't know how long they've been in the water.
Yeah.
They have no understanding of who these guys are or when they potentially went down. Sub in Gwen's Gwen's commanding officer, Lieutenant Dick Atterbury, comes in with his PV-1 crew. They relieve Gwen because he was running out of fuel. Right around this time, a PBY 5A Catalina. Bigger fan of the 5B Catalina. Don't fucking know anything about these things.
This is a flying boat.
Yeah, flying boat, basically. Is on patrol in the area. It's flown by a man who's Lieutenant Colonel Robert Marks. Bob Marks is the closest thing I think you can be to the embodiment of an angel.
For these guys, yes. It goes between them and him and the first guy.
Yeah.
The guy that actually found them, they have him up on that same pedestal. This Marks guy, he actually has the ability to do something about it. So
Robert Marks' balls are unquestioned.
Yes, of a variety rarely seen in our day and age. So the PBY Catalina, people have probably seen pictures of it, but it's called a flying boat, and it's the one that is kind of has the wings that actually sit on a little tower above the fuselage. The part of the boat, the fuselage is kind of shaped boat-like on the bottom of it. The wings come across the top. It's got two big engines pretty close to the center of the wing, and then out on each wing, it also has like a little float that actually drops down to keep it balanced side to side.
Would you call it like a mono wing just because there's no separation with the fuselage?
Yeah, that the wing is where they actually that's where all the fuel tanks and everything are. But it also has these giant like blister windows on the back of the plane on each side to where you can lean out, kind of like when people install those bubble windows on their fences where their dogs can like stick out and look.
Yeah.
Giant versions of that to where they can get outside and actually be looking like completely. They were search and rescue planes, or scout planes is what they were. These planes are supposed to land in harbors, calm waters, things like that, because they're coming into land at more than 100 miles an hour. Anything that's not flat or that they run into, whether it be a small wave, it's just going to tear the thing up.
You bounce off of an uneven surface hard enough and it snaps that wing off and you're just going to sink.
Mm-hmm. So he's like, he radios back, I see the survivors and everything like that. He gets a report back, hey, don't land. They got ships coming out. As he's flying over, he's actually witnessing guys being attacked by sharks. He is able to visually see him and the guys that are in his crew. I think Catalina had between 7 and 8 crew members. They're watching this shit happen. He's like, did any of you guys hear that order? Everyone's like, nope. He ends up bringing this thing in. I want to say 15-foot waves.
12-foot swells that day.
12-foot swells that day. Bounces off one of them trying to come in and ends up landing and being able to land safely, but damages the plane enough to where this thing won't take back off. It's taken enough damage to where they can't fly it, but it'll still float, and he can still use the engines to taxi around.
They said, I believe it was one of the crew on there said that they had popped every rivet as soon as they'd hit the water.
So he lands, of course, not like on top of anybody or anything like that.
Hopefully not.
He taxis around and just basically starts moving around to start picking up people. Goes up to like probably a solo guy first, opens the door. They probably have him at gunpoint because they don't know who this guy is. Find out he's an American. Hey, what ship were you on? The Indianapolis. What the fuck are you talking about? And he just starts moving around, picking up these guys. I want to say they end up pulling in 53 guys into the interior of this Catalina, and there were still more that actually needed saving. So in the PBY Catalina, the tower that connects the fuselage to the wing is actually, you can be in there, and that's where the flight engineer sits to monitor the engines and shit. So there's a hatch that goes up to the top of the wing. So he has guys that are able to actually kind of stand and move under their own power, go up to the wings and start walking out toward the end of the wings and laying down. And he starts having them lashed down with parachute cord because they're probably so weak and shit. They, can't, if a swell comes up, he doesn't want them getting pitched over, and just lines the wings with guys that he's rescuing.
It's out of the water.
The plane's not taking off again.
Yeah. Yeah. The bravery on these guys is something that can't really be measured by words. Double-edged sword of this was as the plane was landing and people were seeing safety just at their fingertips, they started swimming towards the boat, or swimming towards, I want to say boat because it's in the water, but it's plane.
Regardless if you've been drinking the seawater or not, if you haven't, you're still dehydrated, which is still going to cause fatigue, lapses in judgment. You see your salvation right there. It does. It's not, I can see the plane. It's not far. Here's the thing too. Catalina, it's a pretty big fucking plane.
Yeah.
It's not small. So if you see it and you're thinking, oh, this is, I've seen planes before. They're not that big. And you see it, it looks like it's closer. You're like, I can totally make that. Well, even if you had the energy to make it, there's fucking sharks and they're going after the people that are out on their own.
And then if you don't have the energy to make it, you're going to drown trying to swim to your salvation. Yeah. It got to a point where they were seeing enough of these guys trying to make it to the boat that they just weren't making it. They were falling and drowning. That there were members of the Catalina's crew that were actually getting down into the knowing shark-infested waters and lifting these guys up who didn't have enough strength to get inside the plane. You're putting yourself in the water with these shark attacks ever present around you, and you don't care enough about your own safety to get these guys up in there. The bravery is just unmatched. Yeah. It's incredible to think about.
Well, here's the thing too. Sharks were kind of downplayed by the Navy, and most people, living from the interior of the United States, not having fucking Shark Week or anything like that, they don't really know anything about these things until they start ripping into them or a friend.
Yep. Yeah, I believe they said that this is the worst shark attack, on record, probably by a mile.
Yeah.
Just with how bad it was. As the ships were coming in, they were coming in, obviously, at night. This happened at 11. If they were 12 hours away, it's going to be dark. You have these other survivor groups that are kind of starting to panic because if you're so far away that you don't see the plane, you don't know. But there are closer groups that saw the plane come in and land, and they're trying to get to, hoping that they're going to be picked up. if you've waited there for 11 hours and they haven't come to get you yet, there's a panic that comes along to where things start to get worse. That is until you see a ship's light break through the darkness.
Yeah, shining up into the sky to let you know that they're there, when that's a horrible no-no. Like, their priority is to, a lot of these captains, their priority is to get the crew. One of the captains wasn't going to shine his lights and gets relieved of duty.
We'll talk about him.
Okay.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this also isn't accounting for, the initial spread when they first went down was like the mile or whatever it was. Add in 4 days now, 5 days now, they've spread out even more. Even the groups that got together, those groups have started to separate. So even these groups that are together are still farther away from each other.
It's your field of debris, your field of safety, or your field of survivability, I guess you would say, is so immense and so spread that you have to get these guys in. And not to mention, could you imagine surviving all this and then the ship not understanding where the debris field starts and just accidentally running over you?
Because it's nighttime as well. And if you see something approaching, you're going to start swimming toward it, maybe not thinking clearly that it's also moving toward you, and it's a big ship and doesn't stop. Not only that, but imagine being someone that you're in a group, of 5 or 6 guys. You've survived all the way up to this point, but your group is the one that drifted the farthest out.
Yeah.
And you can see the ships and they're out there, but no one's coming over toward you, and you just keep getting further and further away.
So the torture never stops here. The Cecil J. Doyle was the first ship to arrive. She cut her engines, so nobody was going to get sucked up into the propellers potentially, and just floated in, full spotlights into the water, looking for everybody to try to save. The man that you were talking about, Captain Harold J. Thoreau, and I'm definitely going to use his name because fuck this guy. He was the captain of the USS Bassett. He ordered the searchlights to be turned off and to keep the engines going, so not to try to draw attention from potential Japanese fighters that were around.
Or submarines.
That would
draw them right in.
Luckily, everybody else on the ship, on the Bassett, decided to say, hey, man,
we're going cool, bro.
Yeah, we're going to continue on. So as everybody's out on deck denying this captain's orders, his not superiors, but enough of the groups of the important men below him.
His XO, so his second in command executive officer, and the rest of his command crew was like, no, you need to step off.
Go back to your quarters. We got this. Don't you go ahead and worry, or don't you worry your pretty little head about this. They'll go on to rescue 154 men. Mark's plane rendered unflyable, obviously, by the landing, sunk in total. Or as they were leaving, the Cecil J. Doyle just sunk it. I don't know.
They don't want him back or getting the technology. And
I guess, but at this point,
you don't know the bomb's going to drop.
Yeah.
You still could be deep in the war.
True. In total, a stone cold number of 316 men are ended up rescued and live. So out of the potential 900 that went into the water,
I think 800 plus went into the water. Looking at that number from the Bennett or from the Bassett, had he just been like, keep the searchlights off and keep moving forward and everything, they saved almost half. They pulled almost half of the survivors out of the water.
And had that guy not been relieved, that would have been pretty fucked up. So, how does something like this happen? Because, again, you're the Navy. You're on top of everything. Like you were talking about earlier, it runs like a clock. There's plotting boards that they have in these command centers. They had one in the Marianas area. Or on Guam. The commander of the Philippine Sea Frontier on Leyte also has one of these things. They just were sitting there looking at their plotting boards, knowing that they were heading towards Leyte. Just assumed that the destination would be reached in Guam. No calls out, anything like that. That's already passed away.
So was that what it was? Yeah, because there was the HQ of commander in the Marianas on Guam, and then there was commander of the Philippine Sea Frontier on Leyte, and they had plotting boards that are supposed to track the movements of all of these ships throughout their general area. It was kind of assumed, I guess, that ships as big as the Indianapolis would just reach their destination unless otherwise reported, which I get, otherwise reported. But the fact that someone had taken the name off the board at like a shift change or something like that, and the next person didn't know, they saw the name off the board, thought that they had already been in, which again, that shows you how vast this is. If someone is not actually visually confirming and being like, oh, it's a big fucking warship, is it in port? And so that lets it slip through the cracks. But even more so, the thing that gets me on this, the radio signal, the one that we've been talking about this entire time, if you've been expecting like, oh, it didn't get sent off the ship, it wasn't received. No, it was fucking received. It was in fact received by 3 stations. Declassified records were shown that 3 different stations received the distress call. One of the stations, the commander was drunk and didn't respond to it. One of the commanders had ordered himself not to be disturbed, so they didn't let him know. One of them thought that it was a trap by the Japanese to lure ships in to attack. All 3 opportunities to report that and to get a rescue that could have been done within 48 hours at max left these guys for 5 days dealing with this.
Yeah. The issue with the plotting boards comes into a denial fest because they were in between this commander of the Marianas area and then the commander of the Philippine Sea Frontier area. And they both said, well, it wasn't in our area. This wasn't in our hands.
The one that would take the most blame should be in Leyte because you shouldn't be taking the thing down unless the ship is there.
He's got a great justification, though. His justification, when he shows up and the Indy is supposed to be sitting in harbor at Leyte and sees that it's not there, he assumes that they had received orders to go somewhere else and just took them off the board. So he assumed by them not showing up that there wasn't a chance that they were sunk.
It's such a big ship. How would it have been sunk?
They were just called in for other orders and diverted somewhere else.
There's not supposed to be any enemy activity in here. So obviously the only rational explanation for them not showing up is that they went elsewhere.
Fuck it. It makes me mad. Like it's very annoying to me.
Well, the failures are on so many different levels. And not only do the failures occur after it's sunk, the failures that essentially doom it the most are done before it when they don't have an escort. There's so many drop balls here between what the procedure of the Navy and what was actually enacted during this. No escort, no other ships to know this. Can you imagine had they had one destroyer with them? The destroyer gets all the crew aboard, also sends out the distress signal. More ships come if they have to rescue other survivors to search. Bam, it's taken care of.
Yeah.
But because they were forced to go without any type of escort, and the 3 signals that were received weren't done correctly because of a fuck all litany of ridiculous reasons. And then the checks and balances there were supposed to catch each other. And none of them did.
None of the checks were balanced. Maybe a little tip of the cap. Not a tip of the cap, maybe a little bright spot for Charles. Captain McVeigh survives the sinking, thankfully. He learns while he's in recovery at one of the hospital batteries that little boy was dropped on Hiroshima. Oh, I was wrong. Hiroshima was first on August 6th.
Hey, we caught it in the same episode though, so that's good.
Yeah.
So little boy, Hiroshima, fat man, Nagasaki.
Yeah.
Okay.
There were reports from multiple people that had heard about the drop where they're like, that's what we were doing. That's what we were transporting. Clearly, by us dropping off this top secret mission and then this happening a matter of 8 days later, this is clearly what we were doing. And so you have to hope that there's a little bit of pride in knowing that even though they just went through all of this fresh hell, their mission before this was so successful.
Maybe way down the road, but you're dealing with the most traumatic event that anybody could cook up in their fucking nightmares.
Yep.
And you've been through multiple iterations of that. I just think you don't give 2 fucks.
No, you're just happy to be alive.
You at that point too, you got to assume in your head, fuck all. If the war wasn't over or anything like that, I know that I'm not going back. They better not send me back out after this.
Well, you kind of got to be pissed that they didn't just do it earlier.
And instead of just coming out and saying, hey, this is what caused it, it should have had, a convoy or should have had some type of escorts with it. We should have actually probably not told them that the area was, a non-hostile area. Yeah, we probably should have received one of the 3 signals that occurred there. No, this all goes. This is all on the back of one man, and it's the captain of the ship, the guy who's in charge.
Well, that aside, we're going to get into that because I can feel my blood starting to get a little hot about that. But what good does that do? If you survive through this mess, I mean, even hearing their failures, it doesn't fix what you just went through.
Correct,
it is accountability, I guess.
Correct, but it's enough of a failure to where we know about the whole fact of they were given reports that it was an area that wasn't, supposed to be hostile. They were sent without any type of escort. We know that now because stuff came out during the trial, all of that. No one else knew about that. They just knew the ship had been sunk. And so for the Navy to basically be like, yes, it was sunk. Well, how did it get sunk? They could either say, we fucked up and left it out there by itself. And they actually radioed us, but we had people that were incompetent.
Drunk
that actually got that. They could say this whole thing could have been averted had the captain followed a simple tactic.
Yeah. And again, like I say, that's what we're going to talk about. I don't see any way of surviving through all that. And even if the Navy was completely transparent and pointed out all the failures and took credit for it, it doesn't unlive what just happened for the last 10 days of my life, 5 days of my life.
No, it definitely doesn't. But it also makes it to where the guy that was doing his best to try to keep, the men together and do all that kind of stuff, the guy that feels already the worst about this entire scenario is the dude that you're going after.
Do you know the conspiracy with this?
The fact that it was just a horseshit trial. But
about King and McVeigh's dad?
No.
Okay. So in November, McVeigh was court-martialed on 2 charges: failure to order men to abandon ship and hazarding the ship. Basically, failure to zigzag.
Putting the ship in hazard's way.
Yeah. A man named Admiral Ernest King was hell-bent on charging McVeigh. Those are the only 2 charges that they could cook up. Basically, they sat down at a table and looked at all of the possible charges that they could hit McVeigh with. They went through an entire page, and all that they could come up with is failure to order men to abandon ship and then hazarding the ship. Nimitz, at this point in time, Chester A. Nimitz, a guy who you could just say Nimitz, and I think if you're a Pacific War person, just understand who you're talking about, called for an end to the inquiry. He said, no, there's nothing that we can do here. McVeigh couldn't be charged with anything. King says no. King says we're going to continue on with this court case. McVeigh's first request for a defense was denied.
He's basically saying that I'm going to make someone other than the Navy look foolish on this. I'm not going to allow the Navy to take this L. We need to put it on somebody.
And somehow McVeigh's the one that it falls at their feet. And I don't know if maybe the people that had overlooked everything and fucked everything up were so much higher on the chain of command.
Without a doubt, yes.
It's just crazy. So
shit rolls downhill, man.
Yep.
And then McVeigh is the one person that can't put it on anyone else. So they went low enough to say, this is the person that can't go ahead and point the blame elsewhere.
Yeah, potentially that could be a factor. There's another factor that I like too. But it gets so serious that the prosecution brings in the sub-captain Hashimoto to testify for the prosecution against McVeigh.
Yes, they're bringing him in under the impression that his testimony will show had McVeigh zigzagged, Hashimoto could not have sunk the Indianapolis. What happens?
Before we get to what happens, the U.S. population is furious because all of this is being reported. Oh, so the same day, just a little aside here, a little backtrack. The same day that it's reported in the papers on August 6th, or I guess maybe August 7th, that little boy has hit Hiroshima, underneath that headline is the first record in print saying or talking about the
first
sinking
press
of the,
release or
yes.
whatever it is to the public. Big bold words, little boy explodes over Hiroshima or whatever like that. America drops the bomb. Then go down and in smaller print over to the left, is heavy cruiser Indianapolis sunk in like South China Sea or something like that. So, I mean, they're already at that point. It's like no one's paying attention to that.
They've had 4 days to report what they already know. And they chose to wait until now to try to bury it in the headlines. That's how little they wanted people to know about this.
It's the Navy's shame.
Yeah. So, continue on. Prosecution gets Hashimoto on the stand and starts questioning him.
Hashimoto comes up there. They got a little grid or whatever, a little map so he can like explain what he ended up doing and where he fired it. And as he's putting this thing together, they're like, so had Captain McVeigh zigzagged, you obviously were not able to hit this. And he's like, and he has a translator. He doesn't speak. And this is one thing that he comes back to later in life is tries to make things right here. He feels that he wasn't adamant enough about what he's about to say.
He knew enough English, too, that during the court case, he actually questions his own translator.
Oh, yeah.
How wild is that he knew enough English to understand that the translator did not translate the entirety of the message?
Certain words or something like that were changed the narrative of what he's actually trying to say. But he basically explains, he's like, no. He's like, had this guy been zigzagging, I launched a 6 torpedo spread accounting for every way that a ship of this nature could zigzag. I felt like they almost had to play like a game of, not like Battleship, but like playing it out with ships on the thing and being like, well, what if he did this? He's like, this torpedo would hit. They're like, well, what if he did this? He's like, this torpedo would hit. And he's just pointing it out. And he's like, I would not have missed. He's like, I could not have missed this. This is not the fault of a captain failing to zigzag. This is essentially a situation in which there was no other possibility but me hitting this ship. So what was supposed to serve as the prosecution being this like, aha moment of like, see, you should have zigzagged. Everyone's just kind of like, huh. So the way that this is actually conveyed to the court during the translation, though, is it makes it it dials it way, way back to not be this like, should be this piece of exonerating information. They try to almost like excuse it because he's also the sub-commander for a Japanese submarine. Had he been on the side of the prosecution or given them what they wanted, they would have been like, yes, this guy's an expert. He obviously knows what he's talking about. Would have missed it with zigzag because it's not what they want to hear. It's like, yeah, but he's a Japanese submarine commander. So, I mean, how well can you trust him?
Yeah. And basically what the translator did was it cut out the absolutes.
Yes.
When Hashimoto says, I would have hit him regardless. It doesn't matter. You guys could have fucking sent him to the moon and I hit a torpedo up that way to get him. Mm-hmm. The translator's conveying this as there was a greater chance with the spread that I would be able to hit him, not that I would hit him no matter what.
Yeah.
And so it comes across so poorly that that's not even, I mean, you can't really call that great evidence. In fact, you could pretty much exonerate McVeigh on that, except for they don't. He did end up getting exonerated on the first charge of failure to order abandoned ship because there were enough people that came in and testified and just said, no, we knew that the comms were out. We heard abandoned ship through the grapevine. There was no possible way he could have let everybody know over the comms, so we just heard it through the voice of another person. But somehow it didn't matter because he ends up, even though it was at his discretion, apparently his discretion was enough to hang him for this failure to zigzag. Not a direct command. At his discretion. Mm-hmm. They overrode his discretion.
Based upon information that would shape his decision of not doing it.
Yeah. McVeigh, convicted on those charges, basically has his career frozen in place. He's passed down a sentence he's getting a demotion. There's a few other things that are going on, but it wasn't necessarily about that punishment as it was McVeigh was trying to be what his father was. Mm-hmm. He was trying to become the greatest Navyman in his family. Eventually, Nimitz would rescind the actual punishment portion of his charges, but his career just never recovered. He retired as a rear admiral in 1949. November 6, 1968, McVeigh, dressed in his uniform, used an officer's model Colt pistol, not his...
I think Nimitz had remitted his sentence.
Is that what does remitted mean?
I don't know.
I thought it meant that he knocked off the punishments.
I think
but
that's
it still
what it
stays
means.
On his record.
I think that's what it, yeah.
Okay. there's some stories that he had a boat in his hand when he shot himself. There's other myths out there that he actually used his service pistol. It just was an officer's model Colt pistol. But regardless, he ends up taking his life standing on his own porch.
Which is, I mean, I want to say the Indianapolis had their first reunion or something, official one, or they had a very large one in 1960. And McVeigh was there, and a ton of the survivors were there and everything. And this is going to be a recurring theme where they have these get-togethers. I'm not sure if they were yearly or every 5 years or whatnot.
Gwen and Mark showed up too, which I was pretty happy to hear.
Yes, the two pilots ended up showing up. And for a lot of these guys, this was the first time that they had ever seen them or anything. McVeigh was just no bad feelings or anything like that. It was complete polar opposite of how some of these people in the public eye viewed him. Some of the people that had lost, the people that had lost family members on the Indianapolis see this trial, see how this is framed, and blame McVeigh directly for it. The people that were actually there and the survivors are like, no, this wouldn't have happened this would have happened had he even been zigzagging. This is the guy that, we trusted to get us through it. And despite that and everything, he still got so many hate letters and things like that, 68 rolls around. He just, yeah.
Well, he was concerned about going to the reunion because he thought that everybody hated him.
Yeah.
He didn't understand that everybody that served underneath him still supported him and knew what he did and sacrifices that he made.
Yeah.
These reunions are so special. A couple of the documentaries we're talking about from family members of men who had passed on at this point before the doc was done talks about how it was such a therapeutic thing for these guys to go and basically be around the only other people that could understand what they had been through. This is a group of 300, I'm sure less at this point in time, that are meeting for this. And the support crews are invited to these things. So on the ships, they're showing up. And the story that we were talking about earlier is they were bringing people on board one of the ships. They were washing them down and washing the oil off of them.
What were they using? Diesel, wasn't it?
Yeah, because they had to, if you couldn't heat it up to get it off of them, you couldn't just spray it off of them. So they're rubbing them down with diesel. They end up dipping one of the guys in a barrel of diesel and bringing him back up, and they see blonde hair, and the guy turns around and he goes, "We got our first blonde. We saved our first blonde." Like, that was how unrecognizable these guys were. And so it gives them a chance to be able to meet the guys that saved them and the guys that they saved and be able to bond over this experience. It's so important and so crucial that they had it because they lived through something that nobody else really could ever understand. I mean, you and I have studied this at length all week long. I can't even begin to understand what the toll was that these dudes went through. Many attempts to exonerate McVeigh over the years happened, but pretty much all of them failed until 1996. I know that our podcast has a decent amount of reach. I know that there's a lot of listeners everywhere. If anybody knows an 11-year-old sixth grader in 1996 named Hunter Scott in Florida, there's a lot of people I'd like to talk to. I feel like this kid, probably a man now, is somebody that I would really like to talk to. After sitting down to watch Jaws with his father, he sees this very empowering, it was like a 3 to 5 minute speech.
Yeah. I'm trying to, God, I can't even think of the name. Robert Shaw is the actor. But yeah, just basically gives him and Richard Dreyfuss are comparing scars and everything like that. And then he shows him like a tattoo that got removed or scraped off, and it was from the Indianapolis, and he tells him about it.
So he comes away from watching Jaws with the school project. He dove into it with his father, and they did the research, and he presented this school project on the exoneration of McVeigh. The cause made it all the way to Congress. A senator from Rhode Island named Bob Smith took up this fight on the Senate floor trying to get McVeigh's name cleared. He actually has help from a man. His name was Captain William J. Toady. And Toady was actually the final commanding officer of the submarine USS Indianapolis. Toady is such a cool dude because when they were getting ready to retire the submarine, he invited all of the living members of the Indianapolis to that ceremony.
Yeah.
The USS Indianapolis, the ship that sunk, were invited back to, I guess you would call it their sister submarine.
The namesake.
Yeah, the namesake.
Ship. And he was like, I'll bring you back under one condition. I want you in with my men and everything, standing at attention as being crew members of the Indianapolis.
And Toady felt a duty, I guess you would say.
Yeah, as a steward of essentially the last USS Indianapolis, I think, he felt a responsibility to it.
So he's the one that puts in this research along with Bob Smith in this fight. In 2000, there's a Senate resolution that clears McVeigh's naval record. Big Bill ends up signing it as one of his last things before he exits. 2001, McVeigh's naval service record is finally cleared.
Yeah, he's exonerated.
It took that long. I mean, we're talking about 50 plus years that the Navy had a chance to not even take responsibility.
Yeah. But just to say it wasn't his fault.
Yeah, that's all they had to do. They didn't even have to say this was our fault. They just had to clear him.
But by saying it's not his fault, it has to be somebody's fault.
So there were over 300 ships that were sunk in World War II on the American side.
Yeah.
He's the only captain to face punishment for this.
Because all the other ships were probably in situations where there was at least some semblance of culpability or to say for the Navy standpoint, they didn't fuck up 3 different ways or multiple different ways. They always had something to say. Oh, well, there was another ship around it that rescued that one. Regardless if the captain made a mistake, the crew could still get rescued, so there wasn't as much backlash on it.
So to finish off with the fun conspiracy, Admiral Ernest King, the man that had the axe to grind with McVeigh that refused to let him off of the court-martial. Admiral Ernest King had served under Charles McVeigh's father. Charles McVeigh's father had written up Ernest King when he was underneath him for sneaking women onto the ship. And this letter had stuck onto Ernest King's record for the entirety of his career. And when McVeigh's father found out that Ernest King was the one leading the charge for his son to be charged, screamed out, "He's still holding the axe to grind against me." Is it possible that King wanted to try to blame somebody else for this?
Yeah, I mean, there's motive. I wouldn't put it past. I mean, this was a time when, especially at this point, the Navy was going to start downsizing people because they didn't need as many people. This guy wasn't going to have maybe an opportunity to try to do this again. Like, it's horribly shitty, but I can definitely see it happening.
Yeah, maybe there was a little bit more animus towards McVeigh's father for being the only mark on this man's otherwise clean record.
In regards to the ship itself, August 17th, 2007, the wreck is actually located 25 miles west of the reported last position. Now, there were attempts to actually find this ship before. They were able to find some guns and everything, but it was inconclusive if they belonged to the Indianapolis because there was a lot of shit getting sunk out there. But it was finally found, in 2017 at a depth of 18,000 feet. Damn. Parts of it were broken off and everything like that, but they were able to locate the ship. One of the guys in that documentary that we watched, since they knew the location of the ship when he died, I believe his son was also in the Navy, and they did a ceremony where they scattered his ashes because he was like, I want to go back to the Indianapolis because I lost a lot of my friends and everything. And as of, I want to say today, Harold Bray is the sole remaining survivor of the crew of the Indianapolis.
It's incredible in its own right to look at this whole scenario and think that most of the men that were on this ship were between the ages of 16 and 19. I mean, these weren't seasoned military these weren't seasoned Navy men. These weren't seasoned seamen that were out there dealing with this. These were mostly new kids.
Yeah, I think they want, and of course numbers are going to be provided by the Navy and everything like that. They said somewhere between, they downplayed of course, but 100 to 200 were actually victims of the shark attack. the rest of them. And
how could you know?
And yeah, how would you be able to know? You're going off of also survivor accounts of how many people they saw and everything. At the same time, I don't care if it's 100, I don't care if it's 200, 800 go into the water. You're getting some that died just from exposure and drowning. But 200 to be attacked by fucking sharks, man, while you're in here is 200 too many.
Yeah, especially when you think that the whole reason that they were bringing the nuclear material over for Little Boy was to try to lessen the amount of death that's going on there. But the fact that they didn't care enough to try to follow this ship out and protect it enough shows
it had done what it had done what it needed to do.
Yeah, I mean,
it
I
also
guess,
wasn't the newest ship, and it wasn't a flagship anymore or anything like that. But
and it is like we talked about that's a part of the second story. That's not a part of this third story.
Yeah, just an insane series of events, an insane story about not only the ship itself, but just what happened to these guys. Well,
we hope that was a fun, uplifting, delightful experience for you as it was for us.
Mm-hmm. Stay out of the water.
Yeah, I mean that's the perfect final word to say this. I don't imagine that any of these guys were probably very privy to go back into the water anytime soon.
And hopefully you're listening to this during the day and not at night, so you don't have to sleep and have fucking shark dreams.
Yeah, no shark attacks in bed.
All right, guys. Well, we'll catch you on the next episode, and thanks for listening.
Peace.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us for another episode. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe and like button. Follow us. If you didn't like what you heard, still hit that anyway, because we'll probably cover something in the future that you do like. Please follow us on our social media. Adam, hit them with it.
Our Instagram is historically high pod, historically high pod, and we are on Twitter at historically high. That's historically HI.
All right. And if you guys want to send in any feedback, suggestions, hit us up on those two, or you can even do it on Gmail. It's historicallyhighpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again.
Peace.